Welcome everyone to Legion Gaming. I'm your host Donnie, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Ducia.
Hello, everyone.
Ducey, how are you on another, as I always say, fanciful Saturday afternoon on which we are recording?
I'm doing pretty good. It's nice to have a day off after a long, hard 2 weeks of work, and it's also nice that the weather has changed.
Yeah, I just like having days off from work, and the more I get, the better, which is not as frequent as it should be these days.
Yeah.
But, we'll keep dreaming for that 4-day work week someday. It's a good time. For today's episode 81, we're going to be covering a game that's pretty significant in a lot of ways, I would say. It's Resident Evil 4. We're going to be covering both the original game and the remake that is one of the best remakes ever. Spoiler. Although I don't think that's much of a spoiler if you played it before.
My brain is kind of itching, though, because we're going out of order now. But at the same time, I've told myself we already did Code Veronica, too. So this is a good time for this.
We did Code Veronica, and like I was saying, if we were going by sort of a tradition, this would be 2027. And that's pretty far out there because we intended for this to be released on the same day that Resident Evil 9 is coming out. So as you're hearing this...
Which is today.
Hopefully you'll be hearing this as you're playing the game, or you're hearing this on the way to get the game. I don't know, whatever you're doing, but Resident Evil Requiem looks really, really good. I'm very much excited for it. I've been excited since they announced it and everything that's been leading up to it. And I thought it'd be fun to cover another Resident Evil game. And this one is not directly related to Resident Evil 9 necessarily, but it is somewhat in parallel because Leon has a significant role in this game, obviously, and he does in Resident Evil 9 as well. So it'll be a fun episode because this game is, I would say, a pretty historical game in many respects, and remake, even though it's newer, I have a feeling that's going to be sort of a benchmark for remakes in a lot of respects as well.
We should have done an anthology of Leon because he's been in a
it
lot
worked.
of the series. 2, 4, Gaiden, 6. What else?
Maybe Operation Raccoon City. I think it was a character in there, but that's obviously non-canon, and that game was really not good. It's not Umbrella Corps bad, but it's well, I don't want to say it's close because Umbrella Corps is pretty bad.
No, but he's been at the forefront for a lot of games now. It's surprising too because Chris and Jill were a couple of the originals, and we haven't actually been able to play as them for a long time.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, but really it's weird because you're right, because Capcom didn't anchor Jill and Chris as much, and then what they ended up doing with a lot of those characters is they ended up being like supporting characters in future games. So it's like Jill wasn't even in a game till 5's DLC, I think. Yeah, I can recall, and Chris was in Code Veronica. But then after that, he was in, he didn't appear till 5. So it's weird. Like Leon has kind of taken the spotlight in a lot of respects, despite being a character in 2. So it's an interesting sort of journey for Leon and really the series itself, because much like the first game, this game really sort of established its own genre, despite being still survival horror in some respects.
I also like how this whole series of Resident Evil, like when it first released, it was a little bit in the future. Like the game took place in 98, the game came out in 96. Mm-hmm. Now they're pretty much the same year as they release, and the characters are keeping up with that. So Leon is now, older and still kicking ass.
He's got a lot of gray because I think Requiem takes place pretty recently as well. Mm-hmm. And he's definitely his age. Like he definitely looks more seasoned, as we'll call it, more mature. And it's
like us.
Yeah, we've aged with them. Maybe not as gracefully in some respects, but 9 looks really good because it kind of has the two dynamics of the two characters. So Grace, she is the daughter of one of the characters in Outbreak, which is kind of amazing that they even bothered with that.
Oh, that's where she's coming from.
Yeah, and then Leon, he's different. He has a different gameplay twist where Grace is more traditional Resident Evil, and Leon is more, we'll call modern Resident Evil with the more action-oriented gameplay.
Definitely the Leon from the Resident Evil 4 remake.
Yeah. So it'd be a fun time to talk about Resident Evil 4 because it's still a pretty timeless game. If you do want to reach out to us, you can let us know whatever you want via email. I like saying via a lot because it feels very 90s to me, at legiongamingpod@gmail.com. And I post a lot of my collections, videos, all kinds of random stuff, whatever stuff that kind of seems kind of cool at the time. And you can find us on Instagram at Legion Gaming Podcast. So a lot of fun stuff there. Before we get to everything Resident Evil 4, though, Ducey, what have you been playing lately?
I was, trying to remember, trying to think about it. There were a lot of days there where I was so dead from work that I wasn't picking up a game at all. But after our last episode about the Game Boy Advance, I did get back into some of the Game Boy Advance games on Switch Online, mainly the Mario Advance series. So I was playing Mario Advance 1, which
You're
was
playing new old Mario.
Yeah, which was Mario 2. And then I played a lot of Mario Advance 4, which is Mario 3, if you're keeping track. Yeah, but those are always fun. And then one day I had a day off and it was just pouring rain all day, so I wanted some like comfort gaming. And I've also been watching Fallout Season 2 with my wife, and it gave me the itch to get back into one of the games. So I just got right back into Fallout 4 as I put 8 or 9 days into it of gameplay time. And there's really not much more for me to do, but I keep finding stuff because I'll go online and I'll look up maps that have everything already found. And then I look at my map and I see, oh, I've missed that little marker. I'm going to go there and see what it is. And then I end up opening up these little side stories that they don't have official like objectives or anything, but they are something that you can do from start to finish and get even more loot. And yeah, that just Fallout 4 always kills time for me. I'll blink and suddenly like 2.5 hours have passed. And I'm like, whoops.
Yeah. It's too bad you don't have a PC, because I think you would love the PC mods and everything else that people add to the PC version of Fallout 4.
I want to play the Fallout London so badly.
Oh yeah, I need to get that myself because I forgot that was the thing as well, because I meant to get that and it finally released. I should track that down actually, because I do have Fallout 4 installed on PC, because I'm very curious about that. It's a fan-made game that is its own game. It's really just a total conversion mod for Fallout 4.
Yeah.
And I don't know the story of it, but it takes place in London, and apparently it's just a really well done, very robust fan-made game, which is always incredible.
I mean, from the trailers, it looks like it could have been officially published. Like, they have all new missions and all new locations. Even if they built it on top of the old map or whatever, it looks very much like London.
It looks like a brand new game, which is I'm always amazed at what modders can do and what all these ROM hacks and fan games. It's really incredible, because obviously this is not easy stuff. It's a time investment. All of these people are doing it more often than not for free, because you can't really sell a mod or anything like that in most cases. And
especially with it's all modern graphics. It looks like Fallout 4, but in London. Like, it's not, and I'm not saying that these are easier to make, but it's not some sort of pixel game like a flashback of an 8-bit or something.
It depends there. It's a different workflow, because it's 3D modeling is probably, I would say, easier than hand drawing sprites or whatever process they use. But it's a different thing when you're using like mod tools and everything else as they've done.
And they've done so much with, I'm sure there's like plenty of voice work, and there's all new lines to say and all new missions to give. So it's like crazy what they would do.
That's my thing. It's just, I always look at how the production of that goes. And I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I just trying to imagine all the logistics and coordinating and like, having essentially sort of a full development team, independent of anything, trying to coordinate voice work, voice actors, and all the things that happen. It's really impressive. So I do have to check that out myself. Yeah.
Yep. I also, the last thing I've been playing kind of off and on too is fits with what we're about to talk about, and it's the Resident Evil 8 New Game Plus. It's probably the first game since Resident Evil 4 Remake that I've wanted to go back into and just play all through it again with all the stuff I already unlocked in the first round. And then I went back and I played some Resident Evil 4 to prepare for today's episode, and I was like, oh no, I kind of like Resident Evil 8 better.
That's surprising, actually.
Yeah.
Well, it's there are two different games, plus the Resident Evil 4 Remake is still based on a 2005 game too, right? So
that's what I was noticing. I'm like, it's definitely a lot easier to pick up and play than the original, but it is still kind of slow and clunky, like classic Resident Evils have always been. I'm sure I'd feel the same way if I went back into Resident Evil 2 Remake, even though that was an amazing remake compared to the original. It's gonna have some issues compared to how smooth 7 and 8 ended up being.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that comes down to the fact that one, they're remakes, so they have a foundation. Whereas 7 and 8, while obviously inspired by older Resident Evil games, they're brand new. So they have their own sort of design principles and aesthetics and mechanics that are unique to them, but also still Resident Evil in their own ways.
And I think having it first person sort of lightened things up.
That changes a lot as well. That's a drastic change on its own.
Yeah.
Going from third person to third person in this game, even with the addition of the third person modes, obviously.
Yep.
Did Resident Evil 7 have a third person mode, or did they not? It was only 8 that had that, right? That's what I thought. Yeah.
They never went back and changed that.
Yeah. For what I've been playing, let's see. I was playing Neo 3. That came out at the beginning of February, and I've always enjoyed the Neo series, even though they get really effing hard, as you saw me play Doozy.
It looks so fun, and I know I would get so frustrated right away.
Yeah, like you saw me die a couple times with that boss, and it was one of the earlier bosses, obviously. And I finally beat him. I was chugging through because it is sort of. It's more of an open world game in this instance. The previous games were more mission based, so it's like, you go through a mission, usually like a big open area, but this is more open world-ish. And I was cruising through, and I got to what's called the Crucible area, which is, these are probably more like the earlier games' missions, where there's these confined areas, but they're still pretty massive. But the thing in here is that the enemies are more dangerous, as if they weren't dangerous enough to begin with.
Yeah.
And I got to the first boss in the Crucible, who's like this big. Like, the whole premise of the game, the reason I like Neo so much is because they are Souls-like games, which means they are difficult. You'd have to learn. There's a learning curve for sure. But also, this is sort of the closest proxy I had to Onimusha without being Onimusha, because they take place in like, sort of feudal Japan, or in some instance of Japan's history, but they fold in the yokai and like the demon world, the demon realm kind of invading Japan in a sense. So that's what Neo essentially is in a nutshell. So this Crucible area is sort of like this mass concentration of demon energy. And I got to the boss, who's like this giant ghoul enemy with 2 snake hands that are kind of crazy, one to fire and ice. And I was just getting thrashed beyond belief. So that's been on pause since then, because the other game that absolutely hooked me that released shortly after it was Romeo is a Dead Man. This is a Suda51 game, and that's the director of the game. His name's Suda51. That's his nickname. And it's developed by Grasshopper Manufacture. So they've done all these really wild games like No More Heroes, Killer's Dead, Shadows of the Dam, like these really... They feel like early 2000s games because they're kind of rigid in their design in that sense, but they're so story first and like just really out there, and like everything is just like a wild trip. And Romeo is a Dead Man is on that same sort of wavelength, where you play as this guy who he has his girlfriend named Juliet, so it's also sort of a twist on Romeo and Juliet. Nice. Obviously, right? So basically what happens is your grandfather collapses space-time with one of his experiments, and it turns out that Juliet is sort of like this multiversal being, sort of goddess that you have to go find, because the idea is like you're dead, like you've been killed because of this sort of space-time collapse, and then you're revived, you're turned into, you have like these cyborg parts, like your cyborg arm and cyborg helmets, and then you're recruited by the space-time FBI, and your intent is to go across space-time to defeat these space-time fugitives. One of them's like a guy who harvests organs on the black market across time. Another is a guy who runs a cult across different time periods. So this game is just insane, over the top. It's kind of like Twin Peaks on acid with a little bit of like Evil Dead.
Do they try to incorporate these bad guys into like the history of the world, where like, oh, Jack the Ripper was never explained, and it turns out it's like one of these time travelers?
It's not that direct. I don't know if maybe they're inspired by some of those sort of historical persons. I'm not totally sure, but the story is just, it's a wild ride the whole time. Like there's this also sort of subspace instance that you go, that's you're sort of loose, you're tied between different areas of the level you're in, and then they're all pixelized. Like there's this pixelated TV guy who's just saying like these parables to you and all this crazy stuff. And there's a twist at the end with him as well. But I ended up playing through the whole game. It was a really great time. The last 2 bosses were an effing nightmare, but I beat them. But if you want like really just over the top, crazy, early 2000s, hack and slash kind of game with a crazy space-time story on top of it, great time. I really love this game. I hope a physical version comes out. The last one I'll talk about that I got into previously was one I discovered last week called Under the Island.
Oh, I'm almost gonna get that.
Yeah. So this is it's an indie game. I came out of nowhere. I really didn't hear anything about it previous to this. I just saw news of it come out this week, and it is a Zelda tribute to its strictest terms. Like, it does not hide the fact that it's been influenced by the older Zelda games. Like, the trees look like straight out of Zelda. Your character you play is her name's Naya. She's like this girl with a hockey stick. she even sounds like Link when she swings
Oh yeah.
the stick, right? And the story here is just, your parents are taking you on a sort of a summer vacation to like this. I don't know if it's like an island where they're doing like some archaeological dig or something like that, and then you fall into like a dungeon after you like hit this or you touch this statue, and that kind of starts your whole journey of discovering what these ancient ruins are. And so far, it's been really great. It's been very Zelda-like in a lot of respects. Like there's always some puzzle that reminds me of Zelda, like pushing blocks or something, or like you might have to match these ice blocks and melt the ones to make sure you match the shape of the of the pattern on the other side. It's really good so far. I'm only like, I don't know, hour and a half in, and there's definitely been some sort of like early head scratcher puzzles. I'm like, how am I supposed to do this? Like I'm supposed to eliminate all these podiums here, and they're all sort of colored, like just kind of matching them like was like bejeweled, like 3 of a kind.
Oh yeah.
And there's one puzzle where it's like there's 4, and if you match 3 of them, it disappears. So it's like, how do you make all 4 disappear so you can unlock the door?
That sounds like old Tetris Attack.
It is kind of like that. Yeah. So it's really cool so far. I'm definitely going to get sucked more into it because it's just like the sprite work is just so damn charming and so vibrant, and it really does feel like they wanted to make their own Zelda game, and they've done a pretty good job with it so far.
Yeah, I was going through the eShop on Nintendo after you sent me that trailer, and I put that on my wish list. I think it's on sale too. For a couple more days.
Yeah, I think it's one of those early release kind of discounts, like Guns of Fury had back then, where it's like if you buy it within the first couple weeks, wherever whatever timeline it is, you get it for $17. I think it was like 16 or $17 when I got it.
I want to get that because it has classic Zelda vibes. I also want to look into Big Hops because that has more modern Zelda vibes. Like,
yeah, that looked really awesome too.
You're a frog, but it plays kind of like Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. And then there was that other one you just sent me. It's like Star Fox, but roguelike.
Oh, I forgot what the hell it's called. It's
something.
Fur Squadron EX or something like that. Yeah, it's that's also very much inspired by Star Fox, and it is a roguelike, which we've talked about this before. Like everything's a roguelike now, everything's a Souls-like, like everything's a like kind of thing. And for me, it just depends on the genre. Like Absalom is one of my favorite roguelikes because it's a beat 'em up roguelike. And I have a feeling with Star Fox, like we were talking about that one game, Skyforce Reloaded, where that's a shoot 'em up, and it is a roguelike where it's like you just go through the levels over and over to collect medals and upgrade your stats so you can progress further. And I think that's great because I always kind of liken that to an arcade experience where, you're pumping quarters into it, but technically you're also kind of learning everything as you're going along. So that's what I hope this Star Fox kind of game is like.
Yeah, the great thing about Skyforce is, unlike a roguelike, every level is always the same and all the enemies come at you the same.
That's true.
Like like a regular shmup.
They're static. There's no randomization of the levels. Yeah,
so
that's helpful.
Once you memorize that, you can get better combos and better bonuses and then get more points to buy upgrades and stuff, which I'm hoping this is what this fur game is like, because Star Fox, I think I told you, like, this makes sense that it could be a roguelike because Star Fox was such a quick play that you ended up playing a lot of the early levels over and over and over again.
Yeah, especially to get the other pathways and everything.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a roguelike by tradition just because it wasn't like difficult and you didn't have persistent stats, but it was replayable in that same sense where it's like you would go to explore more pathways or different, you make your own pathways too. Like you didn't have to stick to the hard route the whole time.
Yeah, no, you could like find the little secrets, fly through the arches and stuff like that. So I always thought, like, if I'm already doing that with this game multiple times over, why not also be able to upgrade my ship and make the early parts a little easier and then keep going to different new routes?
Yeah. I'm probably going to pick that up soon. I know it's on Switch and PC and basically everything. Under the Island, I think it's also on Switch, PC, and essentially everything as well. I just got on Switch because that just... those kind of like 2D games are just perfect for Switch. Like I tend to get the more powerhouse heavy games on the consoles or PC.
Yeah.
Everything that I feel like is like a good portable experience like that, I get, and I think it'll be a good time. I think that's also like under $20 as well for that. I think it's called First Squadron. I should really look it up because I'm assuming it's something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But I imagine it's not expensive, but I mean, it's great. Like that's what I really love about gaming now. It's like people could be very critical about how there's not enough games, this and that, but it's like sometimes I feel like those people are the ones who are playing these same games every year that are always charting, right? It's always like Call of Duty, the 2K games,
Madden.
Fortnite, Madden, right? And it's like there's a ton of great stuff coming out. You might have to dig for it, but there's a lot of great indie games out. There's a lot of just great games out. Sometimes you have to seek out because not everything's going to be advertised that way. Like I found this just someone posted, I was like, hey, you should check this out because it's a great Zelda-like kind of game.
Well, that's how I found Big Hops. Some people were playing it and then making little quick clips on Instagram, I think, about it. Also, somehow we both were recommended that Formula Legends game that I'm interested in getting because it's like Formula One, but it's the cars are like cartoony and everything, but it seems like it's very in depth. And then also releasing at the time of this episode's release is finally the Disney Afternoon Collection on Switch.
Yeah, there's that, which came with 2 exclusive games. I found out that they are not going to Xbox or anything else, right?
So I definitely have to get it on Switch.
You definitely have to get it on Switch. It includes Goof Troop and
Bonkers.
Which, we were always hoping for Goof Troop.
Yep.
But Bonkers is an interesting addition because I know those games weren't terribly great. They were just fine, I think, at best.
Yeah, I feel like it was like a little bit more modern Tiny Toons or Animaniacs or something. Yeah.
It's probably on that same level, but not not on the same level of quality is what it is.
Yeah.
And also, since we're talking about more releases on the 27th, because there's Resident Evil 9 Requiem, there's Disney Afternoon Collections, there's also 2 bigger ones that just were announced and are pre-orderable. It's the Pokemon Leaf Green and Fire Red.
That's crazy
Switch.
that is coming out all of a sudden.
And they're $20 each, which I can see being a discussion point because of course the thing is like I can emulate these. If you want to buy a cart, that's like $100 minimum if you want an original cart, right? At the same time, it's like if you want these on your Switch, $20 to have these games, okay, whatever. Like they're going to sell no matter what. That's the thing is Pokemon's going to sell.
It's a freaking steal compared to like 120 for the original cards.
Yeah. So I'm just going to get them just because like I do have, I've emulated them before, obviously, but I do like to have the Pokemon games just to have, especially with that because a lot of Pokemon games are usually hard for me to get into or stick to because they're just so slow or what have you. Like ZA, I fell off of that pretty hard after like 15 hours of just like going in a straight line and like being, all these stupid side quests, like come back here, do this. I just wanted something that was like OG, and I'm really glad that Leaf Green is coming because that is Gen 1 and that's what we grew up with and that's what I have the strongest affinity for.
They some people do make a good point that it's about time they start upping the Gen 2 stuff like Gold and Silver.
Yeah, because I totally missed that boat, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think those carts are at least a little bit more inexpensive comparatively, the Game Boy Color ones, but then also those remakes that are on DS that are supposed to be really good, those are insanely expensive. Yeah. So those are like, you're never going to play those on you could play them on a Switch, but Nintendo has put a lot of effort to change those like they did with the like Castlevania did with the DS collection games. Yeah. It's not ideal. It works for the dual screen stuff, but I don't know if Nintendo's going to go through that effort for Heart Gold and Heart Silver.
Well, I wonder how much like you used the second screen in the Heart Gold and Heart Silver. Because
I'm not sure
because I feel like
look it up.
Other than was it Dawn of Sorrow with the drawing, you didn't use the second screen too much in the other ones.
No,
like Castlevania.
And Heart Gold, maybe they have something where you can pick your Pokemon or deploy them or choose moves. I have to look it up. Frankly. Yeah. That's my assumption, at least. Yeah. All right, Juicy. Well, I think it's time to talk about some Resident Evil 4. We are here to talk about one of the, I don't think this is blowing things out of proportion, but this is obviously one of the most influential, one of the most impactful games of the early 2000s, and easily one of the best games ever made, which is a pretty bold thing to say, but I don't think, you just look at the stats of Resident Evil 4, I don't think that's too far of a big claim.
I think what makes it even more impressive is that it's the 4th game, or technically 5th, of an established series that had already settled in a way, and when you said the name Resident Evil, you knew what to expect, and then all of a sudden this like not only turned that series on its head, but then like you said, it influenced other games with the over-the-shoulder way of doing things and just all this extra stuff that other games took from. Like,
yeah, and it's we'll kind of organically dive into this and talk about like its influences and everything, or it's how it influenced other things. But it's pretty incredible that the Resident Evil series really has 2 games that influence an entire genre, right? Because the first Resident Evil game survival horror existed before there was like Alone in the Dark, and you can argue that maybe did it first, but also Alone in the Dark is much older at this point. Like it was 1993 versus 96 for Resident Evil 1.
Even Sweet Home before that.
Sweet Home before that, but Resident Evil 1 really defined and sort of laid the foundational blueprints of survival horror, especially at that point in 96.
This is how you do it, like, more approachable.
Yeah, like they kind of refined certain things. It was still 90s clunky. It's still kind of crude in a lot of ways, but they're better than what the predecessors of the genre were doing. And then Resident Evil 4, which, by the way, for release here, came out January 11th, 2005 on the GameCube. The PS2 version was out October 25th, 2005. And, of course, it was ported everywhere. And, of course, we're going to talk about the remake, too. But in relation to that, like, then you go to Resident Evil 4, where I think we kind of have to give like a prehistory of what was leading up to Resident Evil 4 as well, because Resident Evil does have a history before this, and it took a lot to get to Resident Evil 4, and especially with the game that we finally got. This is one of those bizarre instances where it took like, I think they had like 4 different iterations before they landed on the final version. And it's kind of crazy when I think about that, because nowadays with game development, it's really hard to justify a long development time because trends change so quickly. And in this instance, this game could have been canceled now. Like if this was being produced today, they're like, look, you tried 3 or 4 times.
Well, yeah, like think about the games that we're still waiting for. Grand Theft Auto 6.
Yeah, 13 years later.
I don't think it's gone through 4 different iterations. I think it's just taking that long to make a Grand Theft Auto that we already know. But yeah, it's crazy how many times Resident Evil has done this. Even when we talked about 2 and how there's a 1.5 version, there's like...
That's also true. Yeah, it's a good parallel.
The Resident Evil 4, there's like a 4.1, a 4.2.
Yeah, 4.25 or something. Who knows? Yeah. So we should kind of give a little bit of history of leading up to 4, because Resident Evil obviously was an established series before this. So previous to 4 was Resident Evil 3, which came out in 1999. So just as far as the difference in time there's September 1999 was Resident Evil 3, and then we didn't get Resident Evil 4 till January 2005. And in between that time, they released a whole bunch of different games. So in between Resident Evil 3 and 4, there was about 9 different games between 1999 and 2005.
I did not fully realize that all of these came out before 4. Like I knew obviously some of them, but like we'll talk about Outbreak and stuff. I thought that was a little bit after,
a little later,
or maybe the same month or something. Yeah,
but I think that's the thing, is because we'll go through the list here real quick too. But I think that kind of gives more context to why it needed to be reinvented, right? Because just like in Capcom's probably, I don't want to say the most guilty of it, but Capcom games, Capcom series usually have that feedback, especially in reviews and just fans in general, where Capcom releases multiple games in a series, and then it's like they do really, really well. And then it does get to a point where popularity starts to wane. Like Mega Man did the same thing, where it's like they did 6 Mega Man on Nintendo, and like, oh, we're tired of this, reinvent it. There's Mega Man X. They did that 3 times on SNES, X4, X5, X6, X7, X8. We're tired of Mega Man, right? So Capcom knows how to produce really good games, and they do sequels really, really well. But just like with anything else, it gets to a point where fans and people just want something new and different, because in most instances, you're kind of retreading the same ground, which isn't a bad thing, but it sure can be when there's like 8 or 9 games in the series and they feel like they were in 2002, or excuse me, with Resident Evil 2 or 3.
I think the even closer tie to Resident Evil is Street Fighter.
Yeah.
Because
Resident
Evil 1 and 2, I can't remember if 3 did this that much. They had so many different versions, like Director's Cut, DualShock Director's Cut. The Code Veronica had the original and then Code Veronica X. And, you know, Street Fighter, we talked about in our episode, Street Fighter 2 especially, had so many year after year. And then finally you get like a Street Fighter Alpha or even a Street Fighter EX.
Yeah,
that was
you get those weird spin-offs or... Yeah, other games that are related to the series and maybe not canon, but it was just something different that they thought would catch on in some way. A lot of instances they didn't.
Yeah.
So with these games, so after Resident Evil 3, we had Resident Evil Survivor, which was that first-person light gun shooter.
Yeah.
Which in the US isn't even a light gun game anymore because, you know, of Columbine. They took out light gun compatibility with that. So it was really just for the controller. So that game was a stinker in a lot of regards. There was Resident Evil Code Veronica, which is one of my favorites. That was released in 2000 with Code Veronica X in 2001. Resident Evil this is I don't really count this, but I'm including it because it's a release. There's Resident Evil Survivor 2 Code Veronica, which is this is the second in the light gun series of that was only in Japan. It's like an arcade light gun game,
and somehow worse than the first.
and worse than the first. And it was released by Namco, which is an interesting collaboration between the two. Resident Evil Gaiden, this is a Game Boy Color game that was a really bite-sized, different adventure that had some cool ideas. Maybe wasn't the best game, but really cool Game Boy Color game where you're on this ship, but you play as Barry. The battles are cool because it goes to this first-person perspective minigame where...
And then it's like a rhythm timing
Yeah,
game.
because you have like this bar going back and forth, and you have to hit A on the sweet spot to take a shot, and the zombies are shambling towards you, which is kind of crazy. Really great game. Very, very expensive to find now, unfortunately. And there's no other way to play it unless you do emulation or buy the cart, which I think the cart's probably around $200 or $300 right now, and the complete copy is around $700 or $800. My brother just found his box, which very much delighted him because it's an expensive box.
I thought at least it was still in the like hundreds.
No, I think it's. I'm pretty sure it's in the 300-ish range from what I saw last, because it's just been climbing over the years. So that was 2001 for Resident Evil Gaiden, and of course one of the big ones that we love is Resident Evil Remake. That was 2002 on the GameCube. Resident Evil Zero, Resident Evil Dead Aim, which.
I'm going to say, like, the reason that we have the next ones you're about to say is because of Remake and Zero. Like, the Resident Evil series now shifted to GameCube exclusivity for the mainline games. And then Sony and them were like, but we still have a good relationship with you. Can you still give us some Resident Evils?
Yeah, we were the House of Resident Evil, by the way.
Yeah, and so now you get these other ones that you're going to mention.
Yeah, so there's Resident Evil Dead Aim, which I rented this when I worked at Hollywood Video. I've been trying to find a copy. I just don't see it often. It's not expensive, but this game is really cool, even though it's not a good Resident Evil game, where it's kind of like Resident Evil Gaiden, but in 3D, where it's like you're playing as some guy, I forgot his name, he's totally not related to the main story, I don't think, and you're on this, I think it's like a cruise ship with an outbreak happening, and the twist here is that, like, when you go into combat, it goes to like a first-person screen, and you can use your gun con too, like your light gun on PS2. Cool idea and gimmick, not necessarily like a great Resident Evil game, but I enjoyed it for what it was. Then there's the two online games that probably didn't do well in the US because PS2 Online was pretty not great. Really, the console gaming was still sort of in its infancy at this time because it was really Xbox Live was the number one for good reason. It seemed
very complicated, like setup compared to Xbox, the original.
Yeah, and the lag wasn't good. It just wasn't a very good network, and it definitely felt like it wasn't planned very well. So they had Resident Evil Outbreak, and they had Resident Evil Outbreak File number 2. So that's why I'm really shocked that Resident Evil 9 has some relation to Outbreak, because I think Grace in 9, she's a daughter of one of the other reporters in Outbreak who passes away at some point after Outbreak, which is why Grace goes back to Raccoon City to go investigate something revolving her mother's death or something like that.
Yeah,
I can't fully recall. And then those are all up until 2004, and then we finally get to Resident Evil 4 in 2005. So when you look at that sort of slate of releases before Resident Evil 4, there's not a whole lot of differentiation between the games because they're still rooted in old Resident Evil Survivor horror. So it's one of those instances where these were selling, but definitely there was a point, especially with reviews and just sort of general, I think, fan reception was like, look, we love this. Outside Resident Evil Remake and Zero, like, we're getting kind of tired of all these side games that really are doing the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah, I think what helped my perspective is that I didn't pay attention to the ones on PlayStation.
Yeah.
Once they went to GameCube, I loved the remake of 1, and 0 was pretty fun too, like looked great. Mm-hmm. And so that's all. And then all these years passed where I was like, okay, I'm still playing Remake and 0 up until 4 came out. But when you look at this list, you're like, oh, 4 was needed. Like this shakeup of how things are done was needed.
Yeah, and you also have to consider too is that the PS2 at this point, it's 4 years in. There's been a ton of amazing games already, like Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 2 are out. GTA 3 was already making a big mark. So Resident Evil really needed to evolve because it would have been left behind pretty quickly if it had released another, sort of tank control, survival horror kind of game. Like I think
there is still some tank controls in this one.
There are, but I mean, like, more, with the pacing and everything, like,
and the fixed cameras.
Yeah, and the fixed cameras, like, it just, the way gaming had evolved since the early PS1 days and like where Resident Evil kind of found its roots. I don't know if they had done another game, if it would have survived this, if the series would have survived. So I think 4 was definitely one of those breaking points, make or break for Resident Evil. And as a note, in the midst of all of this, between 1999 and 2005, they did manage to release 2 Resident Evil movies in the middle of all that. Between Resident Evil 3 and an actual successor to 3 with Resident Evil 4, there's all these games that came out and 2 movies, and we still don't have like an official Resident Evil 4 game that was continuing the main story.
I think they could have been okay with doing some things the old-fashioned way because this was going to have Leon in it.
Yeah.
I think people were really tired of all these other side characters, which I was always fine with. I'm like, sure, tell these other stories because now we're going to get 9 from it.
They may have been underdeveloped, right? Which, I'm sure they were different teams, different budgets. Like they're probably they're there for a reason. They're spin-offs and side stories for a reason. But I still think it's great that they exist in some way. Like I wish I could have gotten more in Outbreak, but it's such an online heavy game and the single player AI apparently was terrible. So it's one of those games where you really need to have an online experience. And back then, like, good luck finding 3 or 4 friends who had PS2 online availability because you need the broadband adapter and all these other stuff to make it happen.
I'm surprised they really haven't re-released these now with the ease of access to online.
I would bet if I looked it up, I guarantee you someone has like some fan servers up.
Yeah.
There's some small community of Outbreak players that are still playing today. But yeah, it's a shame that we didn't get to see more of this, or at least there's, I wish they had done something where at least they took some of the story. At least I hope in 9 they talk about the Outbreak stories in some way and like how they relate, because I feel like you have to give context, because I would imagine the vast majority of people haven't played the Outbreak file games.
I think an Outbreak, you could have a whole team of up to 4, right?
I believe so. At least 2, if not 4. I can't fully recall.
I mean, that by itself is ahead of its time, because when you think about how 5 and 6 were co-op heavy, we need something like Outbreak again. And then like you, me, and Vito could get in on a game and do these Outbreaks files.
If only, yeah. And now there's kind of I don't want to say lost time, but they're close.
Yeah.
So that was the prehistory of Resident Evil 4. So if that gave you more context as to why it needed to be reinvented, that's really why. So Resident Evil 4's development started on the PS2 in 1999. And we'll talk about these different versions because there's really 4 different versions that are scrapped for different reasons. The very first version I'll talk about actually evolved into its own series, which is pretty incredible. We covered it in episode 71, Devil May Cry, but the original version was directed by Hideki Kamiya. It became Devil May Cry because Shinji Mikami, who was the creator of the series, he considered the design to be way too different than what it was. And we covered a lot of that in Devil May Cry because it's pretty incredible. That's like its own story where that was Resident Evil 4. That was the plan. And then they're like, this is way too different. Like we said, we want to do something different. This is like the polar opposite of the gamut here. It's like it's full-on action game with a little bit of a goth look to it, and became its own another one of my favorite series, frankly, because of how good the whole game, each game was after that.
And then when you look at 4, the middle section, the second act is still at a castle, so they were like, you know what, keep the castle.
Yeah, we like some of these ideas.
Yeah.
The next version we'll talk about is what's called the Fog version. This was when development was restarted in 2001 with announcement in November 2002. So this is significant to me because at this point, like you said, do you see a lot of the Resident Evil games and some Capcom games are becoming GameCube exclusives? I imagine some sort of partnership where Nintendo's like, look, we'll market this, we'll pay so much money for this, we'll subsidize some of the development costs. And there was a point, I remember this very vividly when this was announced, there was the Capcom 5. This was a set of games that were going to be exclusive to GameCube. This was an agreement with Nintendo because Nintendo was struggling with the GameCube sales. I mean, it's kind of hard because the GameCube is one of those systems where in some respects it considered a failure, but it's not as big of a failure as the Wii U. Just like they consider the N64 a failure, because I think it's just when you measure up to like the Super Nintendo and Nintendo, maybe those are considered failures because they just didn't catch on and they weren't significant like the PS1 was.
Or yeah, when you measure it up to its competition, like nothing's going to beat the PS2.
Yeah.
Even if Xbox was a really good up and comer.
Yeah.
Like PS2 was just insane. And then GameCube just happened to be up against that.
Yeah. And that's also the instance too. Yeah. It was against the Xbox and PS2. And this was really when GameCube, or when Nintendo, I should say, they really wrangled up more third-party publishers, because I think that was a big issue on the Nintendo 64 was that they had a lot of great first-party games and second-party with like Rare and other developers that were close to them. But their third-party games were really not the best.
Well, yeah,
either had bad ports or just bad games.
They didn't want those darn carts.
Exactly.
But it did give us another generation of games like Super Nintendo and Sega, where the games were very different. First one that comes to mind is The World Is Not Enough, and how we loved the N64 version, and that was a definite third party.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Eurocom, which was kind of doing a lot for Nintendo anyway with Duke Nukem and stuff.
Yeah, they were I don't know if they were a port studio or what, but they were developing original games. Like they were definitely a good partner for Nintendo, because there were a lot of Eurocom games on there. And I think like Claim's a good partner with them with like Turok and that series.
Yeah.
So it's just Nintendo was really trying to catch up to third party games, or third party developers because they knew like PS1 and PS2 was thriving with third party. Like Sony didn't necessarily have their own, you know, they had like Ape Escape and some like Crash Bandicoot, some games like that, but their third party support is really what also made them more successful. So this agreement with Capcom was really like a big step because you have Capcom, who's one of the biggest publishers and developers ever, and you're saying we're going to have 5 games exclusive to the GameCube to help boost sales, which did not ultimately do that, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but you know, it was these games are still pretty great in my eyes. So the games that they announced for this were PN03, which is project number 3. Do you remember playing this game, Ducey?
I never played it. I remember seeing the box a lot.
Yeah, I rented this. I liked it. It's just
I didn't realize it was Capcom.
Yeah, it's a sci-fi action shooter. It's not the best game. Like, it's really just kind of average at best. Like, it's not, you know, doesn't do anything that really is amazing. Really, the big notable thing about this character is like her character design. Like, she's really just like this fluid. Of course, they made her like early 2000s sexy character kind of thing, right? Beautiful Joe, another GameCube favorite of mine. That was eventually ported to PS2 with Dante was a bonus character in there.
Oh yeah.
Dead Phoenix, which is a shoot 'em up that was canceled, which sucks because I was actually looking forward to that game. Resident Evil 4 was one of the Capcom 5, and then a final one, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, tangentially to Romeo's the Dead Man, Killer 7. That was a totally unique game that was originally only on the GameCube. So all these games were supposed to be exclusives, and Beautiful Joe, Resident Evil 4, and Killer 7 all got ports to PS2 at some points. And in this version, the Fog version of Resident Evil 4, getting back to that, Leon explores Umbrella's headquarters in like a castle-like setting, which again is transfers to the final game in some respect.
That would be cool.
Yeah, and RE2's story writer, Noboru Sugimura, we talked a lot about him in our Resident Evil 2 episode. He worked on the story that included Leon becoming infected with a progenitor virus that gave power to his left hand specifically. Very, very specific there. And there's also a female lead in there that was not Ashley. It was some other character that they had planned on including. And there's also going to be some sort of first-person section that was planned, which I think, which game did we talk about that was Resident Evil 2 where they talked about having first-person back then, or was Resident Evil 2 supposed to be first person? Was that one of the ideas they pitched before getting to 2?
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it was something like that, right?
Yeah, even before 1.5, they were like, what if we did this? And they were like,
that's
are you
right.
crazy?
Yeah,
Like,
so again, it's interesting that they were trying to do that again at some points in the series, and it won't happen until Biohazard 7 came out, which was, 2016, 2017?
Yeah, well, I mean, it did happen with Survivor, but
that's true too.
Not well.
Yeah. Not well. That if anything, that probably when they did Survivor, probably told them, all right, we shouldn't do this.
Yeah, stop trying.
Yeah. So there's the Hookman version. This might be the most known version or the most shown version, I would say. This is one I recall seeing back then. This was shown at E3 2003. It was titled Mabaroshi no Biohazard 4, which is called the Phantom Biohazard 4. This version takes place in a haunted house where Leon's infected by some sort of disease. And this also has a heavy emphasis on paranormal ghosts and living dolls, which you could see in the trailer. Like I remember seeing like it was very atmospheric. Like they had a lot of blue coloring, which is weird, like blue color grading. You'd see like these ghosts flying around, and like you see the curtains, you know, blowing in the wind and everything, and like lightning. Like it was very just forcefully spooky in a lot of ways. Like they try to make this like a haunted house kind of thing.
I'm kind of glad they never went in that direction, because even though there's in Resident Evil 4 the remake, maybe in the original, there's those suits of armor that come out at you, and then in Resident Evil 8 there's the dolls that are going crazy on you, but there's always like this weird physical explanation for it, like there's some sort of parasite or something that's infecting all these things. Like to go over into the paranormal realm would be, I feel like, just a different game or a different series.
I feel like it'd be very different, and I think that might have been trendy at the time. I'm trying to think of when, like, you remember when like The Ring came out, Ju-on, and
that's
all
true.
those supernatural horror movies that were kind of a big thing in the early 2000s. I feel like that may have had some influence. Of course, they were in Japan, which they might have seen this stuff first and foremost there.
They were always making games and movies like that. What
Yeah.
was that one with it had ghosts and you only had a camera?
Fatal Frame.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's actually what I thought about when I was reading about this version too and seeing it back then. It's like it's like Fatal Frame. Like there's ghosts, except they were capturing on a camera.
Yeah.
And also with this game, they were emphasizing illusions and hallucinations, so much so that
Eternal Darkness.
Yeah, Eternal Darkness, and so much so that Leon was apparently going to be able to, like, you know, you could see enemies and you think they'd be attacking you. You could, like, you know, hit them, shoot at them, whatever, and it turns out they weren't there.
Oh,
which, you know, like
waste
you said,
of ammo.
Yeah, but that's how I say it. It's like, I don't know if that's really a cool idea. Like,
Yeah.
that feels like they just annoy the shit out of me more than anything, you know?
Yep.
And this also includes some features that would eventually carry over to the final game, like QTEs, the QuickTime events, and the over-the-shoulder view, and like the laser sight. And also, dialogue choices were planned for this version, but they never came to be because this version was eventually scrapped, of course.
Choices like it could affect the story?
It didn't really have any context from what I read on there. It could be something like that where it's like, yeah, you might choose. It's like Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, where maybe you choose one path when you get like an item here, or, might change something there. So I imagine that's something where I'm sure that was inspired Resident Evil 3's little dialogue system, and they thought we could reuse it, and this version would never came to be.
I like, though, that they keep going through all these different versions, and then they take a little bit here and a little bit there. It's not like they completely scrapped it. Yeah. They're like, wait, that's kind of a good idea.
It's really, I think, at the end of this, when we get to the end of this whole sort of background to the final game, I think this is one of those instances where you could really learn from the fact that, like, there's gonna be a lot of times where you might create something, you might have an idea, and you're gonna go through multiple iterations. And sometimes you won't take all the ideas, you won't leave all of them off the table, but there are some things that you kind of take from your previous versions to add to the final one to make it better. So it's just an incredible story because we don't really get this much in depth for certain development histories, because more often than not, it's like it's scrapped and it's canceled in some way.
Yeah.
They were persistent. They needed Resident Evil 4 to come out at some point. The last version we'll talk about before the final version here is called the hallucination version. There's not much media available for this one where I could see as far as like screenshots or videos. One of RE3's scenario writers wanted to make RE4 even more scary than the previous games, so that just is always sort of like underscoring what you want to do there. It's like, we didn't make this the scariest thing imaginable, because I think that's the thing Resident Evil did try to do, is every game they did try to level up these scares and like the tension, and I think that's one of the signatures of it as well, because that's what made them so successful. So I think that's one thing that they're always trying to beat themselves or top themselves with.
But then it's a balancing scale, and starting with 4, they start to tip the scale the wrong way, and then you see it in 5 and 6, where it's like not really scary anymore. It's just action horror.
It's just full on action movie horror stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the original idea for the hallucination version was inspired by a 2002 supernatural horror movie called Lost Souls. I'm not familiar with this movie. I don't remember it. It had Winona Ryder, and I forgot the other lead in there. But the quote from, I think it's one of the producers of the, or maybe there was the director. They said that, let's see, where the main character suddenly finds herself in a derelict building with a killer on the loose. An arranged version of this eventually turned into Hookman. So the idea is like, it's not so combat heavy. I think you're just being pursued for the most part.
That is very interesting, considering modern Resident Evils now, with the 2 remake, Nemesis, the Baker father in 7, Lady Dimitrescu. Like, all of a sudden they were like, hey, you know how to make things scary? Have somebody constantly stalking you.
Yes. Yes. Much like Nemesis, Mr. X, but now they're more human-like, so they're arguably even more dangerous because they're humans. Yeah. And in this version, Leon is infiltrating Spencer Castle, and he finds a young girl in a lab. And this is the weirdest thing to me, is they befriend a BOW dog, a biohazard weapon dog. I don't know how that works. I don't know what their thoughts were. I just thought this was very, very bizarre. Zombies did return in this, in a later iteration of this version, but development costs and other things were happening, and they just decided that it wasn't going to happen. And this is where Shinji Mikami stepped in and said, like, all right, we got to like redo this. And that's when he took over the directing duties, because I should say with each of these versions previous to this, it was a different director, a different producer. So
wow.
At this point, Mikami comes in, he's like, look, like, we tried this 4 times. We got one good game out, but we got Devil May Cry, which I don't know if it was out at this time. Probably was by the time they were working on these different developed versions. But we really got to make Resident Evil 4 at this point, because it's getting, what is this? Will be 3-4 years down the line, because development started in 99 and they restarted 2001 and so on and so on. And then eventually the story of the progenitor virus was eventually covered in Resident Evil 5, and the Spencer State became a setting for Resident Evil 5's DLC, which was Lost in Nightmares, which I do remember playing. I don't remember much of it. I just remember playing on 360 way back.
Yeah, I can't remember if I ever did after. I know the story, though. I've seen, I think, clips on YouTube of gameplay, and it's got a cool fight with Chris, Jill, and Wesker. Yeah,
I vaguely recall that, because I just played it so long ago that I should replay through it again, because I just haven't touched Resident Evil 5 in probably a decade. I don't know. But it's, again, like you said, Ducey, it's interesting that some things that they developed throughout these versions did carry over to other games, or at least they kept some of those ideas in their back pocket to say we could use these later at some point. And this is the case with progenitor virus, where it eventually became a big thing in Resident Evil 5.
I think it helped that QTEs, it was a couple versions before, but all of a sudden then they hit it big in games everywhere.
Yeah.
So
it
they
was
were
a
like,
big thing.
Let's throw that in there.
Yeah. And I always go back to me, like, I feel like the earliest instance of that was Shenmue on Dreamcast.
Oh, yeah.
Big thing on QTEs. And then it felt like after that, every game had them. It was such a big thing for like cutscenes, and God of War was notorious for having them. It was really crazy how that was a thing, and eventually just people got sick of it at some point, which is fair because it was really freaking annoying in some games.
Especially in 4, we can talk about it when we start talking about the game, where like you got some insta-death in there, and that is annoying as hell.
Yeah, you gotta be fast with some of them. Like, we'll get to it, but there's some QTs where it's like, holy crap, like, for when they come out of nowhere, and you have to mash them pretty fast. It was really kind of shocking.
And they randomized them. I don't remember any other games too much that randomized what you had to do.
I believe they were pretty static for a reason, because it's like, it was almost like a memory game. So this kind of tipped that on its head and said, oh, you're going to hit, square? Suck it. It's going to be X now or something.
Now it's L1. Yeah.
So finally we get to the final version. This is the final attempt that would fulfill one of Resident Evil 4's original purpose, which was to massively overhaul and reinvent the entire genre, or excuse me, the series, which also by proxy reinvented the whole genre of action shooters as we know, especially on the horror side. So Mikami thought that Resident Evil 0 was more of the same, which led to the departure for Resident Evil 4. And I think that's fair, because 0 is a fun game that also has one of the most interesting shakeups in the series because of that two-character dynamic and dropping items everywhere, which, great idea, but also annoying.
It's weird that they said that was more of the same. I know it's because of the camera angles and the zombies, but they did at least try something different with that one.
They did. And I think that was the thing, is they tried, but at the same time, like, at its core, it's still Resident Evil, right?
They
like,
didn't try enough.
Exactly.
They didn't try to change it.
It's a step forward, but not like 2 steps forward or something.
Yeah.
So some of the development team was actually apprehensive about this. And I do remember this too, when Resident Evil 4 was starting to be more shown, especially with the earlier versions. And eventually when they got to the final version, there was a lot of apprehension because people are like, what happened to my Resident Evil? And I think that's a fair thing, because change is always rough. But when you have this departure where now Leon's looks more grizzled, it's more action heavy, which is a big thing. Like, it looked more than just sort of like, scrambling zombies.
It was, it's going to happen again, but in 4, you start seeing scenes of the enemies carrying pitchforks and weapons, and people were like, these aren't zombies. Why are they like talking to me? And why are they like throwing weapons at me? And now in Resident Evil 9, I've heard that like the zombies are back, but they have memories and they have the ability to talk as well. And people are going to be the same way. Like, what the hell are you doing to my zombies?
But then they see like everything in the trailer, like, okay, well, I'm not so scared about this. It looks freaking awesome. Yeah. So Mikami, to kind of quell their fears in some instances, he justified the changes because he said that the story didn't revolve around Umbrella. So that's sort of like his narrative hook, saying like, look, I understand your apprehensions about reinventing the series and being in a drastic, or going with a drastic departure, but this doesn't revolve so much around Umbrella anymore. So I think that's a fair thing to do. It's like, this is Resident Evil, but now it's like a different kind of Resident Evil, where it's like you're pursuing a different kind of villain, a different kind of virus in this instance, or parasite. But it's something that, at least I would say, like, it's fair enough to justify saying like, this is why we're doing things differently, because it's not the same story that you know of from the previous games.
You know what? I just realized in the entire Resident Evil series, the most unbelievable thing is that Umbrella actually collapsed because of its bad actions.
Yeah. Well,
no corporation is doing that.
This was the 90s, dude. This is when people had hope for things. Not now, where, we have a bunch of corporate lobbying that keeps them afloat.
Yeah, you know how much more damage Umbrella would be doing in the series now if they had like the protections.
They'd be getting tax subsidies today. Like, oh, we're going to cut your taxes and other things. Yeah. So let's see. Mikami was actually inspired by Onimusha 3 Demon Siege, another one of my favorite series by Capcom, the Onimusha games. So Onimusha 3 was a pretty drastic departure from the original 2 games, because this had it did have fixed cameras but had 3D control, and it definitely was a step forward. There's also 3D environments. It wasn't pre-rendered, if I recall. There's still like pre-rendered sections. Like, I remember certain animations in the background would probably be pre-rendered, like a waterfall or something like that, right? So it's like it was a mix of like pre-rendered and 3D. So he was inspired by that because of how it sort of changed the formula, which, again, Onimusha was rooted in Resident Evil in some instances too. It's just Resident Evil with samurais is what it is.
Yep.
But with that, he thought that if you change the camera, it'll change how the game is. And I think that's one of his critiques of Onimusha 3 was like, he felt like the camera didn't really lend to make a different gaming experience. And this is where Resident Evil 4's, maybe its biggest sort of innovation or biggest change is where, like you mentioned earlier, Ducey, where they changed the camera perspective to be right over the shoulder of Leon. So you have like this third person view, but you're still kind of like looking at his back and you're seeing more of like what his perspective is without being in first person.
Which also creates tension because the enemies can flank you. And you can't always see behind you. You hopefully have a good sound system because you can kind of hear when something is behind you or when like a scythe goes whistling past your head. But I think, that actually helped create more survival horror than the old games did.
It did. And I think, again, when you kind of round up all the changes they did for this game, as far as like it being more action oriented, like you have way more ammo, way more guns, and you also have the perspective change. You also have the laser sight, which is a big thing because now you can kind of literally pinpoint where you're shooting, even though it's like still kind of shaky because, you're Leon and you're not. At this point, when we get to the story, it's only a few years removed from everything that happened in Raccoon City. So it's like he's not quite the grizzled veteran in 9.
Yeah.
So he still is sort of that perspective where it's like he's still relatively new. He's been put in this secret government program, essentially. Like he's been forced into it. And now you're in Spain trying to find the president's daughter. But really all these changes kind of culminate to the enemy designs as well, where I actually think these enemies are more dangerous because they're still human-like, right? So they have those things where it's like they can pursue you. And one of the craziest things in this game is when I first played was when you shoot an enemy like towards at a headshot, they tilt their head out of the way.
Yep.
Right. So they can react to your shots in different ways. And I think that's what makes this even more dangerous. I think that's the thing too, is like they're changing from what the horrors of Resident Evil 1 or the earlier games were, because that was rooted in like the fixed camera angles and really just sort of being this, emphasizing the atmosphere to make you more scared and increase the tension. Here it's different because these are still human-like enemies and they behave like humans in some way. And they're all trying to kill you in some way and group around you.
They can even coordinate a little and they speak Spanish. So you don't, unless you understand, you might not fully understand, and then all of a sudden they're ganging up behind you. And I feel like this makes more sense for the aiming and everything. I didn't like the Resident Evil 2 remake when it came to aiming because the zombies shambled almost too much. And I know when you shoot one, obviously there's going to be some impact and movement there, but like this makes more sense. These guys see you pointing a gun at them and they're like, I don't want to be shot. Let me duck.
Yeah, like they still have some human sensibility, even though they're infected with a parasite. Like they still can react in certain ways. And yeah, I think that's what really makes it effective with all these changes as well, because it's like they still had to make the game scary in some way.
It was also interesting that you could introduce minor stealth aspects where you could sneak up on them and try to stealth take them down with a knife or something. But as soon as one saw you, he would yell out to everybody around. Yeah,
and it didn't matter. It wasn't like a specific zombie that would do that. It's just one is literally just flagging everyone else like, hey, he's over here.
Yeah.
And now you're swarmed by like 6 or 7 enemies, which is a lot. Like in previous games, you might have 6 or 7 zombies in the general area, but it's like by the time they get to you, you've dispatched half of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and this one too, because of the way you move, it's still some tank control, stop and shoot. That got dangerous real quick.
Yeah. So I'll go through the release dates real quick here before we get to some reviews, quick reviews. Let's see. This was released, like I said, January 11th, 2005 on the GameCube. What's interesting is that this wasn't exclusive, but Halloween 2004, Capcom actually announced that a PS2 version was in the works and that was coming out. That also was going to have an extra scenario called Ada's Separate Ways. And this was added by the PS2 porting team. They just were like, I guess they had extra time and they're like, hey, like, can we do this? And then Mikami was on board with it and they gave Ada her whole scenario, which I thought was really cool.
I never played the original Separate Ways, but I liked it in the remake. It felt kind of like classic Resident Evil 2, where you're seeing the same story from a different perspective.
That's exactly why I loved this, because it intersected with Leon's campaign, and there's also some instances where you see like the zapping system too, where you see certain events that are happening parallel to Leon's. Like when you in the beginning with the church bell, you find out in Separate Ways that Ada is the one who rang the church bell if you don't do the sniper trick, which is great because that question isn't brought up when you play it organically. It's like, oh, the church bell, is that someone like, this is like a cult. Is someone over there like ringing the bell? Like, it's church time.
Oh, they were looking at their watch like, oh, it's time.
Yeah, and you find out that you've been helped by someone this whole time, which you find out later in the game. But I thought that was really incredible that they intersected that way.
There's also like 2 or 3 other times before she finally reveals herself to Leon that she was helping him.
It's really great.
Yeah.
It's pretty brilliant when you look at it in retrospect that they folded this in after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reviews before we get to the story here real quick. I got a little bit of everything because, we're in the online era at this point. So just in general, like I said, this is really regarded as like one of the best, most influential games of all time. The Metacritic score for the original is at 96 out of 100, which is really insane because a lot of games, I don't know what the average would be, right? But it's like to get 96 out of 100, it's pretty damn hard.
That is very high.
That's
Holy
like
crap.
Zelda level, right? It's pretty incredible. GameSpot at the time gave it a 9.6 out of 10. IGN gave it a 9.8. At that point, I'm like, just give it a 10. 9.8, like what's those 2 points?
Oh, good old
There,
IGN.
right? Yeah, it's kind of fun. Nintendo Power reviewed it, issue 189, March 2005. All 5 reviews gave it 5 stars. They emphasized that the camera perspective may seem like a small change, but it made a huge difference. Enemies are smarter and can really surprise you on repeat playthrough. They said it's fast, frightening, and nearing perfection, which 100% agree there. GamePro reviewed it, issue 198, March 2005. One sad thing I noticed is GamePro doesn't have the faces anymore. You know how those, like the scale was 1 to 5, and they had like those different excited faces. Apparently it was gone by 2005, which kind of made me sad. But they get graphics 4.5, sound 4.5, control 4, fun factor 4.5.
That seems weirdly low.
It does.
For GamePro, especially.
for the graphics. Like this is one of the best looking GameCube games ever. It still is. I mean, if you go back to it now, like it's kind of muddy and gritty, but at the time, this was a pretty stellar looking game.
I think it even looked better than the PS2 version that came out later.
Yeah, the PS2 port was still really good, but it definitely had some concessions. Like I think, it was a little bit more blurry, I think, or the anti-aliasing was off, and I think some of the colors weren't as good either. Like it wasn't a bad port, it was just a little bit more noticeable. The GameCube one was better. But GamePro loved all the changes from the graphics that they said that raised the bar, which again is interesting. They gave it a 4.5, which again, it's only half a point from a 5, but at that point, like just give it a 5.
Yeah,
it's
a 4.5 raises the bar.
Yeah. They thought the deadlier enemies, traps, and new backgrounds were all really great. Small issues they pointed out were this is like really minute stuff. It's not a big deal, but they pointed stuff out like you can't reload while moving, which I do really sucks. Like that's rectified in the remake, obviously, because it's just not the norm anymore.
Yeah,
but it did suck that like you had to stop, pose, reload.
It's like they still wanted to hold on to very tiny things from the original Resident Evils,
because you're tense. Like the only option, and that's the other thing they point out too, is like you can't go in the menu and reload either. So it's not, you can't cheap out that way. So you're standing there with reloading, which again, the whole point is to raise the attention that you're being pursued by people who are very human-like, right? EGM reviewed it, issue 189, March 2005. They gave it a 10, 9.5, and a 10. All 3 reviewers were blown away by the graphics, the brilliantly designed enemies, and how it streamlined and fixed a lot of the series' flaws, like the camera control and enemy AI, and inventory management. They thought the graphics were... they compared it favorably to Metal Gear Solid 3 and Ninja Gaiden, which I think... Yeah, those are 2 really good benchmarks for the time. Metal Gear Solid 3 and especially Ninja Gaiden on the Xbox were truly like some of the best-looking games on consoles at that time. And they also said that it's one of the best experiences you'll ever have, and it'll blow your expectations away. So I think that's the thing. Like we talk about Metroid Prime, how that was, people were kind of apprehensive before that came out for the shift to first person, and Resident Evil 4 maybe wasn't as cautious because people were like, it still is Resident Evil in a lot of regards, but some people were still kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to like this because it's not Resident Evil. And EGM saying like, no, play it, forget all your expectations. It's going to blow everything away.
I think what helped get those expectation remarks is that it came out on GameCube, supposedly exclusive at first.
Yeah.
Whereas if it had come out originally on PS2 and Xbox, they might have been like, oh yeah, this is a cool change for Resident Evil, and that's about it. But like when you say it's GameCube and Nintendo, your expectations get like very like weighted.
And you're more skeptical, I would say. You'd be more skeptical than if it wasn't announced on the other consoles.
And so it's almost kind of rude to say your expectations are going to be blown away. It's like, well, you shouldn't have doubted Nintendo in the first place.
Well, you shouldn't doubt Capcom in a lot of regards too. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know how many bad Capcom games were out at this time, but they had a reasonably good track record for the most part. I mean, just by this time alone, like they had Onimusha and Devil May Cry, 2 big series. And probably other things I'm forgetting that off the top of my head or whatever, but Capcom's Capcom.
Yeah.
They're not, maybe after this is when people weren't trusting with like 5 and 6, but I'd say up until this point, you didn't have to distrust Capcom too much. All right, Juicy, we'll get into the story real quick and then we'll get into the bits and pieces of the game that we really liked and all of our memories of it and all that good stuff. So I'll try to be brief here, but Juicy, you can also add context. I know you get in lore more than I do in some of these instances. You probably have reviewed them more recently than I have as well. But the story in here is that Leon is sent on a mission to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, from a cult in Europe. So at this point, like we mentioned earlier, Leon has been sort of I guess you could say, forced into this, some sort of special ops team
They
under
never-
the president of the government. They don't really say what it is, but he's been sort of heavily pushed and encouraged to join this. Like, he didn't really have much of a choice.
Yeah, it's not like the anti-BOW stuff that Chris got into. This is like very close to the president, and it's like it's almost Secret Service, but not. It's like Secret Service based on anti-BOW stuff.
Yeah, and this does take place, I believe it's about 6 years after Raccoon City, so it's 2004-ish, somewhere around there. So it's also kind of contemporary and ironic that's releasing, it released 2005 and it takes place in 2004. Leon then goes to Europe and he discovers, he goes to like this small village where he might find the daughter, which they've codenamed Baby Eagle, which I thought was kind of fun.
Yeah.
He discovers that the villagers have pledged their lives to this cult called Los Iluminados, and they've been affected by a parasite called Las Plagas. So very different than the G virus and T virus, and this is it's a parasite, so a lot different. And now, like I've been hammering in earlier in this episode, these are more human-like enemies. They're not shambling zombies or slow plying around. They're, zombies are really just trying to feast and eat and satiate their hunger. These people are just essentially just mad people. Like, they're just driven by madness, and this parasite that kind of controls everything they're doing. And the leader of this cult, Osmond Sadler, he's actually injected Ashley with a parasite to manipulate her into injecting the president with the same parasite, so eventually he can take over the world. So it's this crazy, insane story to sort of infect the president of the U.S. so that he eventually could take over the world.
It's weird that he really has no ties to Umbrella, that he's just like out to get the world on his own.
Yeah, he's just some mad
cultist. And like Umbrella and Wesker are probably sitting off to the side going, "Hey, that's our thing. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
But what I don't think they say in this, and I've heard from other like reports and files and stuff, is that the Las Plagas is kind of how they started research on Nemesis, because it's in Europe and it's in Spain, and like you'll notice that these creatures, as you're shooting them, they have these crazy tentacles and stuff.
Yeah, some can sprout them.
Yeah, and so you'll notice that also Nemesis has that, and Lisa Trevor in the Resident Evil remake, she has those like wormy tentacle things too when you shoot her a certain way. And this was all based on, this is how they tied Resident Evil 4 back into the original trilogy.
Yeah, and also you can kind of see those shades in Nemesis too, where he's controlled by Umbrella, and that's how this parasite is really that same sort of thought where Sadler wants to be able to control these people who are infected. It's almost like a hive mind, and he's controlling them in some way.
Yeah, he's got some sort of alpha parasite in him.
Yeah,
that still has power over all these other baby ones.
Yeah, and in addition to this too, so Ashley's getting infected. Leon does get infected pretty early in the game as well, so he's kind of dealing with that in the midst of all this. And then Ada appears throughout the game, and she helps Leon while also trying to take a sample of Las Plagas, because she's working for some company, which we later find out is, of course, Wesker. He's the other narrative continuity thread that they fold into this, where it's like is he working for Umbrella in here too?
No, he's on his own now. He's like, screw you, Umbrella. I'm trying to... He's basically Sadler in a different way. He wants to take over the world for himself.
And he's had his own experience with viruses and Umbrella before, so it's like he knows. I guess he has a better idea of how to harvest or make use of this parasite. I don't know.
He's collecting all the different viruses from the games, like Thanos and the Stones. Like he's got a T virus sample. He's got a G virus sample. He's got the Code Veronica sample. I think he's got a piece of Nemesis. Like, he's just over here like, oh, now I want these little...
He's probably got like a little room in his house full of just like these bioorganic weapons.
He gets the Las Plagas from 4. He gets that black goo stuff from 5. He's just over there mixing it all together.
He's got a cauldron of disease, apparently.
Yeah.
There's a point where Leon eventually makes it to a research island to look for Ashley. And then you find Krauser. He's introduced. He's this character that was part of Leon's intensive training for this organization that he works for. He was really put through the ropes, which is where Leon kind of gets his grizzled veteran kind of mentality, where he's more hardened now. He's not out of the police academy on his first rookie year. He's now like a grizzled veteran. Krauser is working with Sadler, essentially. At this point, it's revealed that he sort of orchestrated the kidnapping of Ashley to bring her here and to sort of get Sadler in a point where he can facilitate his plan to take over the world.
But also, I think he's like working for Wesker too. Like, it's weird. He's like a double agent,
sleeper agent kind of character in here.
And then Ada's like, why'd you get me when you got him too? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
And then you get to a point where you battle Krauser, he's killed, and then Leon and Ashley do remove the Plagas virus parasite, from their bodies. And at this point, Leon kills Sadler with Ada's help, and then at the last minute, Ada, takes the sample to take it to her, to Wesker, essentially. And at this point, she escapes by helicopter, and this is where you leave on a jet ski with Ashley to escape the island. And then separate ways, I won't get too far into it, but we kind of talked about it. It's really just sort of this, it's Ada's perspective of the story getting to the end of Resident Evil 4. It's much more condensed. I don't know how long it is on the original PS2 version, but the remake version, I really love it because it was, I think, 7 chapters.
It was bigger than I thought it would be.
Me too. And
it was about 7 or 8 hours.
I'd say between 6 and 8 hours, depending on how long you take to get through it. But it's a really great site. So I'm sure, I don't remember much of the original of Separate Ways, but I'm sure the remake is just more well designed because they probably have more time to put into it. I don't know how much time they put for Separate Ways, but I imagine it's just a little bit more fleshed out on the remake.
Did the original have all of her like tech upgrades compared? Like, she's very different than Leon.
I think she did have her little grapple hook, but I can't remember. It's been
because she also has that like scanning eyeball thing.
Yeah,
she's very tech savvy in this one.
She's very gadget heavy, yeah. But her story is really fun to go through, and I definitely encourage you, if you haven't played this for some reason, go through on the remake because it's definitely worth playing. It does get a little more context to some of the things happening in Resident Evil 4 and Leon's campaign, and it really just makes it a more well-rounded adventure overall, I would say. All right, Ducey. So let's talk about the game finally, I guess. How do you remember when you first got this back in the day? Like, how did you feel about it? Because I will say one fun thing about this too is this is one of those weird GameCube games that was 2 discs because the GameCube.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, the GameCube had smaller capacity with those mini discs. So this was a 2-disc beefy adventure. This game was definitely the longest Resident Evil, I would say, because
wasn't the Resident Evil remake 2 discs because 1 disc was Chris and 1 disc was Jill?
The original Resident Evil remake?
Yeah.
I think it might have been.
Yeah.
I guess I could check my shelf, but I don't want to shuffle over there right now.
Yeah, I totally forgot
I forgot about that
when you mentioned that they were still doing multi-discs on GameCube.
Yeah. It kind of it wasn't as frequent on PS2 at that point. That's kind of fun to think about.
But I remember the discs weren't evenly spaced. Like, there wasn't much left when you switched discs on the GameCube Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, I will say, like I was saying, this is definitely the longest Resident Evil game at that point.
Yeah.
Because this game is huge. I think one of the things we can really talk about, we'll talk about here, obviously, is the change in structure of the game where, in the earlier games were just one sort of contiguous thing where it's like you go start in the mansion, you might end up in a lab, or you start in a city, end up in a lab or something like that. Like, it was all sort of connected in some way, even though you had different channels to get to the next section of the game.
It was very Metroidvania.
Yeah, exactly. Where you sort of, you get the items you need to progress and get to a new area. This is very different where now there's a mission structure and they're all broken up into chapters. I think there's 15 to 18. I can't fully recall.
I want to say 15.
15, right? Somewhere on there. At least 15, maybe as much as 18. I can't remember. And they're all, I don't know, maybe an hour long depending on the chapter. So I think they're pretty well paced and spaced out, which, again, going back to the Devil May Cry structure, where they also has a similar mission structure. That was like, we made fun of that too in some instances, where it's like one mission was like a minute long.
Yeah, that was weird.
Like, you walked out the door, got a key, and opened it. It's like mission complete. Yeah.
Wait, what?
This is different. And I think it's really cool because it kind of, it makes the game is much longer. I'd say it's like 18 to 20 hours minimum, which is really beefy for any game in general, especially an action horror game like this.
I jacked that playtime up a lot in the remake.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
I can't remember how long it took me in the original GameCube version. I'm also trying to think. I'm pretty sure I pre-ordered this and got it day 1, but I don't think I got. I'd have to check my shelf, but I don't think I got it combined with like a player's guide or anything.
Oh, my brother, he got the GameStop exclusive tin. He still has that.
Nice.
It's that big old steelback that wraps around the case.
Yeah.
Because he was ridiculously excited about this. Like, we all love Resident Evil, but he was like just over the moon excited for Resident Evil 4. And he pre-ordered with his own money. We got it. And the funny thing about Resident Evil 4, the original, is I've actually never beaten the original. I've gotten to the end because my brother and one of my buddies who was over like all the time, they would play this game all the time, over and over, because you can unlock more weapons like the Chicago typewriter and New Game Plus and everything else that was going on, or you could unlock. So it's like I would see the ending like a couple times with them, and there was times where like they would beat it and I would fall asleep at the end. Like, my buddy beat it and I was like, oh shit, I woke up. It's like I missed the ending again. I didn't see it, So it took me until the remake to actually go through from A to B complete. But the original game was really massive, and I think one of the big things too is like, we didn't talk about the merchant, who was a big change of this.
Mm-hmm.
So in earlier games, right, obviously you would find ammo and supplies all over the area, and it's like it was very limited in some respects. And here now you got this merchant who's just this guy who travels around, with a hood on and everything, and he just says, "What do you buy?" And I think that was one of the big changes for me to get used to too. Is like now you could upgrade your weapons, which wasn't a thing in Resident Evil necessarily. Like you get small upgrades, but this is like sort of a persistent upgrade where it's like you could upgrade your handgun to its maximum power, have better aim, stuff like that.
Quicker reload speed.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight is kind of odd that like any gun would have a quicker reload speed when that should be based on the human. But
That's also true, actually.
But did they have the crafting system in the original, or did that come in the remake?
I can't remember if they had the ammo crafting stuff. I can't fully recall. I want to say they did. I don't know.
I do remember they had the herb combinations still.
Yeah, that was a standard. That's like a Resident Evil staple.
The difference in this one though is you could give yourself more health.
Yeah, that's right. You can increase your health by was it the blue herb you can combine it with?
Yellow.
Yellow. Yeah, you could combine all 3 herbs and it would give you like a health boost. So that was the thing too. I will say that overall this game was really difficult too. I would say it's one of those games where as you go on it gets easier, but that's also partially because you're learning the game, which is organic, but also you're leveling up your guns and your weaponry, so you have a lot better chance of surviving. Where I think even in that first section, when you get to the village, which you want to tune up some of the horror in this game, like you start off the game where you're pursuing, you're going off to this middle of nowhere shack because one of the police officers is missing. Like this sort of the beginning of you trying to find Ashley.
Yeah,
you eventually find him in this village, this very tiny village, and he's being burnt alive at the cross, which is one of the most incredible things to see.
Yeah.
And freaking brutal. I think that's really what set the tone for this game and really told people it's like, this is still Resident Evil. Like, you're still going to see some of the most monstrous things humans can make.
What also sets the tone is that this triggers an event. Like, once you get seen, this triggers an event, a timed event, where they're just constantly coming at you throughout the village. You have to run through all these different houses, climb up on roofs, and then you hear the chainsaw start.
Yeah.
And you're like, what in the hell is that? Because this is like, Nemesis was a big step forward in Resident Evil 3, where he was going to chase you around from screen to screen. You hadn't seen anything like that before. Now, the chainsaw guy is like kind of a basic enemy, but will kill you in one hit.
He can if he gets close, and that's one of the most brutal scenes as well. It's one of the more brutal death scenes in this game, because that's one thing this game does do with certain enemies. Is like they have it's almost like a cutscene. Like if you get caught, and you're almost dead, like there's something brutal that happens to Leon. In this instance, there's this crazy cutscene of the chainsaw guy just sawing through Leon basically in half. It's really brutal, and like there's blood on the screen and everything. It's really insane. Like, of course, my brother's just like smiling. He's like, yeah, this is great.
Just laughing as it's happening.
Yeah. One of the challenges I will say about the early game too, that also makes it a little bit more difficult, but again, it wasn't necessarily something you could pick out at the time, but you couldn't move while shooting. So whenever you had to shoot anything, you had to stop in position, which was, took a little bit of a moment to kind of get an aiming position. And then you could aim your laser sight at the enemies. And now they could react more drastically to being shot like in the legs or the arms, because also in this game Leon has melee, which is a big thing. It won't get you out of every situation, but if you want to conserve ammo, sometimes it does kill an enemy instantly if you manage to shoot them in the leg and do like a German suplex or something on them. You
can shoot one in the leg and hobble him and then roundhouse kick, and if it's a group, you just kicked like 3 guys down. And then you run some more.
And I think going back to this village area, I think this is also a great, I'm always I always have what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I'm always more receptive to games that have like this open area that kind of like sort of draws a line in the sense, saying like, this is what the game's going to be like.
Yeah.
And I think that village is another example of showing you what this game is going to be like later on. It's just saying it's going to sort of subvert all your expectations of Resident Evil. And now you have enemies that are grouping up to kill you. And also with this game, what this section also does organically is that you're forced to run away, but you're also like passively exploring, because it's like now you can put like credenzas in front of windows. You can knock ladders down so they can't climb up after you. You're putting obstacles in the way to try to like put some distance between you.
You actually get the shotgun pretty early if you're paying attention.
Yeah, and because that's just on the wall. So that's the thing too, is like in the midst of you being chased, you're also scrambling to see like what I can use, what's available, like whether it's ammo, health, or you find the shotgun. And like you said, it is a timed event, but if you do manage to survive, you can end this sort of section early if you manage to kill a chainsaw guy and the zombies. There's also a cheat. I'll call it a cheat.
Yeah.
Was it the original as well?
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
Yeah, it's really great because we talked about that bell being rung earlier, which is way off in the distance that sort of calls off these cultists. And we find out later in Ada's story that it's her. But if you have the sniper rifle early in the game, which you can usually have by New Game Plus, you can actually aim at that bell tower way off in the distance and hit it, and it dings, and it calls them all off.
It's you wouldn't think to do it at the first time you're playing it because you think, oh, that's just a clock tower in the background. Maybe it's like painted scenery.
Exactly. It could just be like a skybox or something back there. Yeah. So it's pretty incredible. But yeah, that first section of the game, I think really kind of underscores the expectations of the rest of the game, where it's like, this is not your typical Resident Evil. This is what you can expect. And that's what happens. I feel like the game just gets more difficult because you're like, holy shit, like I'm more tense now because if that was the beginning, what else am I going to see throughout the rest of this game?
I think this game does a really good job, and not all games do this, but it does a really good job of ramping up the difficulty along with you being able to upgrade your weapons to make them stronger. It's cut up into 3 acts, you might say, where you're in the village, then you're in a castle, then you're on that military island. And each time the enemies are basic and yet more advanced. Like when you get to the castle, there's all these cultists in robes and stuff. They kind of act like the villagers. They speak in Spanish still. They shamble towards you. And then you shoot them, and a giant worm creature comes out of their head.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, crap, what is this now? And you have to either shotgun them or flashbangs work really well. And then you get to the third island, and by now you've got like the third version of a pistol, maybe a second version of a shotgun, like a better shotgun. And now they have these like military guys with the parasites in them, but they still have their military training, and they have like crazy better weapons. Some are attacking you with chain guns. Some of them have metal shields, like riot shields that they hide behind. So you have to learn all new ways to take them out, but it never feels like you've gone too far too quick. Like you don't have to go back and grind for like better guns or anything.
I do think it's the learning curve is pretty good because, like I said, if you get through that first few chapters, then you can get through the rest of the game, because I really feel like that's the most difficult. Like even that first village can be hard if you're not,
because you're so low on ammo.
Yeah, you have very little ammo, you have very little resources. The original has a knife, which is more it's the usual Resident Evil utility. The remake introduces the knife in a different way, where you have it has durability, and you can also upgrade it as well. So I upgrade that a lot because that's like when push comes to shove, you have no ammo, nothing else, you have the knife. So that works.
There's also you can, I think in the remake, I can't remember in the first, but you can time it so that you can block attacks, you can parry.
Yeah, I don't think parrying was not in the original, so that's as a parry nut. I do love that I can do that. Or like even if they throw an axe, you can technically parry it, and if they attack you, you can parry it out of the way, which gives you a small window to attack, to counterattack. It's not like an instant kill or anything like that. But again, it gives you that one extra bit of survivability that you probably wouldn't have normally.
Now, my one gripe is, since I've been playing Resident Evil 8 and then I go back to 4, Resident Evil 8, you're Ethan Winters with a little bit of training, and he has like a regular knife that he found in a house. No damage to that because it's not something they wanted to put in the game. But story-wise, it doesn't make sense that you can parry the crap out of everything and just constantly go to town with this knife. Whereas Leon, every time you see the merchant, you better repair your knife.
That's what I do. Yeah, I spend my money. And one side note about this, I don't know if I mentioned on this podcast before, but you know me, dude. So I'm always sort of sensitive to certain sounds. And it's one of those things where like the jingling of the collecting of the pesetas, the gold coins.
Yep.
I love that sound so much. Like every time you pick one up, it just takes me back to 2005 and some of those earlier games. So I think that's one thing for me. It's like I really love the sound of this game. But yeah, every time I went to that merchant, I was upgrading the knife or replenishing the durability, because that thing was really useful in the remake. Some of the bosses we'll kind of touch on real quick here, because that's another thing that this puts the series on its head, is the boss fights. Like one of the earliest ones is with that I forgot what the hell it's called, in the lake, the lake monster.
Oh yeah, is it? It's not a. It's not an alligator, is it? It's like
No, it's I want to say it reminds me of like a catfish or something. I don't know what the hell it is, right? It's something like that.
It's like
But
a giant fish type creature.
but that first boss fight again, I think that's one of the first boss fights. First big boss fight, I should say, because Chainsaw Guy could be a boss fight, but it's not.
Yeah.
But one of the first big bosses that really is unlike anything in the other Resident Evil games is that I don't know what you call it, catfish lake monster. But you're tied. You're in a little skiva boats. And
a
little dinghy, there you go, that's a better word for it. And you're being dragged by this monster and you're throwing like these harpoons at it, which is like such an awesome boss fight. And then there's a point where it swings around and it jumps in, you have to nail it in the mouth. So I think that's one thing that this game also does on top of that too, is that it really makes these boss fights really fun to play. They can be difficult, but once you're on the patterns, which again is like sort of a Capcom signature, going back to like Mega Man, they're not so bad and they're really damn fun.
Hilarious Easter egg is if you haven't defeated that boss yet, but you're at the dock of the lake and you shoot into the water, instant death.
That's right. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, there's a lot of instant deaths in this game, especially in the original. We'll talk about the remake in a second here because the remake is, again, it's like one of my favorite remakes ever, and I think it's fair to say it's probably one of the best remakes ever made as well.
Yeah.
But in the original, there was QTEs almost every other cutscene. This isn't a game where you can necessarily put the controller down, at least in the original, because I think that's one of the things too, is like in the old game, like you had your cutscenes that were done in-game and you had your pre-rendered scenes, right? And in this one, there's no real pre-rendered scenes or anything like that as far as in the main game. It's all sort of, all the cutscenes are handled through the in-game stuff. So you just assume like when you see the little black bars come up on top of the bottom of the screen, like you just, hang out and enjoy the cutscene.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the game will throw something at you, like a boulder rolling at you, like Indiana Jones style, and you have to mash a button. And in here, you have to be very, very fast. It's really crazy. I feel like this is one of the more difficult QTE games.
Yeah. You have to mash a button really fast, and then suddenly it'll switch because Leon at that point is supposed to dive out of the way.
Yeah.
And like I said before, like sometimes the dive is square button. Like you'll be mashing X and then it goes to square. Sometimes it's both like top trigger buttons. If you've died before and you think, okay, this time it's going to be square and I know it's coming, all of a sudden it's circle. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah. And that's something that it would, it did influence a lot of games after the fact. And the QTEs were ramped up to 11 in Resident Evil 6. I mentioned like a couple weeks back, I was playing this with Vito and we got
I feel like they were easier in that though.
They were, but they were way more frequent.
Yeah.
And it did cheap stuff for like, like there was one that was really making me laugh when I was playing with Vito where, you have to crank the stick like Mario Party style to lower a bridge, except there's zombies coming up. And there was so much crap going on. There's like a flashbang, explosion. I'm like, and of course the thing is like so slow to crank, right? That you're stopped in the middle of it. But they really, I think at that point, Resident Evil 6 was sort of the breaking point for QTEs because people were just so sick of it because of all the little things you would do, like running from an airplane, QTE. Some zombie attacks you, QTE or something, right?
I think also at this point, Telltale was bringing out their games like Walking Dead and stuff, and people were like, you know what? Let's keep the QTEs to those types of games and that type of storytelling. Get it out of my action-packed games.
I think they definitely fell out of favor for good reason. And then, other games would take influence from Resident Evil 4, like with the over-the-shoulder stuff, and a lot of the shooting mechanics were taken from it. Like even, Metal Gear Solid 4, if you look at that, like it feels like a Resident Evil 4 because of just how the perspective is with Snake and how he moves and everything, right? So this game did a lot for the future of gaming, and it's really incredible that they did so much at the time with how many iterations it ultimately went through before the final version. Well, I guess we could talk about the remake now, Ducey, because there's not a whole lot different in the remake necessarily.
Oh, I was going to talk more about the bosses because...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I feel like this is one of the few times where I remember the bosses more than the rest of the game. Like
I'd say that's fair. They're all really memorable.
Resident Evil 5, I barely remember any bosses. I think there's this one guy who's on a boat and then suddenly he turns into a giant water monster, I think.
I can't remember.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like this big goopy monster in the 5th game. And then I don't remember anything until the Wesker fight at the end. Whereas 4, it's got the giant fish. It's got the giant that like...
Oh, El Gigante.
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
When you knock him down, then a giant parasite comes out of his back, and that triggers a QTE where Leon goes running up the body and then starts stabbing at the thing.
Which absolutely looks nuts. But I feel like that's very early 2000s where they had these crazy over-the-top action scenes like that. Where, like he's running on the El Gigante's arm, and then like, he gets up and he's just like hacking away at that parasite.
At the bug.
And it looks really silly because he's doing it as fast as you can mash. So it just looks like he's going in turbo mode.
Yeah.
But, great boss fight there. And that's one of the earlier ones too.
And then that boss turns into just basically a sub-boss in later areas.
Well, don't you fight 2 later on as well, right? So, yeah, it gets pretty crazy with those. And that's another thing too is that I don't know. The largest thing we saw previous to this was probably one of the mutations of of William or maybe Nemesis, right? But now you have like a literal, like you said, giant troll looking guy.
I mean, they tried to make Tyrant in the very first game very imposing.
Yeah.
And then even Mr. X. And then here comes this giant thing. From a new perspective, you're like, no, this guy takes the cake.
Yeah. He's not even the final boss either. Like the earlier ones, yeah.
There's also the right-hand man of the main boss. I forgot his name, but he's like 8 foot tall. He's always wearing a trench coat. He's just throwing Leon around in these cutscenes, and then suddenly he turns into like a giant centipede man.
Yeah. Well, also I'll go to Ramon. He's one of the harder boss fights in this game, I thought, and he's crazy because he drops he's like a wallflower mutation. He's really bizarre.
Yeah.
But what he does too is like you're in this I don't know what you want to call it, like this hallway with these different stairways that cross each other.
Kind of a throne room.
Yeah, kind of a throne room thing. And then what he does is he has like the sort of like Rain's parasitic goop or something.
He reminds me of Poison Ivy in the Arkham series.
Yeah, that's I don't think that's too far away because he is kind of like that. He's very plant-like in some instances.
Yeah, he's in a thing that opens up and then you have to shoot him and then it closes up again.
Yeah, and I think there's also an Easter egg here where if you is it a golden egg or one of the rotten eggs or something like that?
Golden egg, yeah.
Golden egg, like I think that's like an instant kill or damn near instant kill. Because that's the other thing too, is like there are these really weird details in this game that are there that some are helpful and some are just exist. Like there's an instance where you can shoot chickens and collect eggs, which give you health. But in some instances, like Ramon, if you collect a gold egg, you can actually kill a boss with it somehow.
And the decision there is that like the gold egg is worth a ton of money at the shop, so you could just sell it and get some good upgrades, or like you said, insta kill.
And the original does have some collectibles you get that you could sell, like little gems, different rubies and whatnot. There's also the hanging blue, what they call them. Do they have a
medallions?
Name? Medallions. Yeah, they're like blue medallions you find all over the area.
Now there's a sound effect I like.
I know, I do like that one those. Too. Yeah, I just love the sound in this game. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Should we talk about the remake now, Deuce? I mean, it's really just
that's probably the one I remember the most.
I'm sure. Well, because it's most recent too. We've all played within the last couple of years, and we could talk about the VR version too.
One of the biggest changes that I forgot happened is in the original. Ramon has a statue.
In the original, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he has a statue. This might have been one of the parts you slept through while Bob was playing.
It totally could have been.
And
it was also 20 years ago.
That ridiculous thing kind of comes to life, quote unquote. It's just like this big mechanical Zord looking thing. And it starts chasing you down a giant walkway. Another QTE. But I was just thinking here, like, in Resident Evil 5, there's a boulder punch. In Resident Evil 6, there's a giant Tyrannosaurus that mutates from a guy. And yet, this is one of the goofiest looking things I've ever seen.
I wonder where that idea came from because, I have to go look that up because I don't remember that running. I feel like that should be something I should remember, though. Running statue? Right? Like, come on.
Yeah, it's just chasing you down. They changed it up in the remake where there's still a statue, but it acts kind of like a regular statue, and you're fighting the guys along the gangplanks, like going around it, and occasionally it shoots fire at you, but it never moves. I think people were expecting it to, and then they never do that part.
Well, they probably realized, like, this is silly.
It is so. It was really so silly. Weird.
Because this game, again, overall, like, this is just it's action, and it's like a little bit over the top. I don't want to say a little bit because a lot of it can be over the top, but it works so well. Like, it's just at this point, like, they've embraced that it's a video game, which is some of my favorite games because that just means that they're not trying to confine themselves to the real world, but they do some really good things knowing it's a video game, right?
Yep. Yeah. I guess you could say within reason, it doesn't completely crack your brain.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's still grounded in some reality, but you do have to suspend your belief in some
It throws in some anime type things. Like, I don't remember if it's in the original, but in the remake, there's that cutscene where the two sisters come at you with chainsaws.
Yep.
And like Leon does a weird kick backflip off a wall just to avoid them.
It's like a flash kick or something.
Yeah, and you're like, you could have also just stepped back.
Yeah. And it would be great if there was like someone who could make a cutscene where it's just like someone takes 2 steps to the left.
Yeah.
You know?
And waits.
Exactly. Just let them stumble. Yeah. All right, you see the remake. This was released in 2023. You and I both greatly anticipated this for good reason. We mentioned this time because we did an episode on Dead Space, and the remake came out just 2 months before this, and that was another incredible remake.
Yeah.
But this is by far the one we were most looking forward to when it was announced. I wasn't going to review too much for this. I'll just give you the Metacritic, which is 93 out of 100, and OpenCritic got a 92 out of 100. So again, like stellar game, over 90 for the remake. It does everything it needs to sort of reinvent the original game while keeping it, I'd say, like 99% the same for the most part.
Weirdly, I think it's got lower Metacritics and stuff because of that 1% that was changed. And of course, there's the detractors out there that are like, I don't want it changed.
Yeah. It's funny because my brother, it's funny because I tell him, it's like, I think you're just not spending enough time with these games to enjoy them or learn them, because he told us he hated the new controls, which are a big reason why I love the remake, because it's more modern to control. I'm not stepping in place to aim and shoot and then, clunkily, slowly get out of that aiming mode to try to run away. Like, it's just sort of a sensibility of modern gaming now. The
way they've updated the enemies, you will die so quick if you do that stop and point and shoot.
And I believe they included the classic controls, and once that came in, then he started to enjoy it more. But he was a little bit more critical about the remake because of stuff like that. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
This game objectively controls better.
He wants stationary cameras and those pre-rendered backgrounds.
I was like, Bob, you can just play the original. I mean, it's been released 3,700 times over the last 20 years, right? But the remake, I really do love this one. They made some changes that bring in line with more modern games. Like the breakable objects now have like this yellow paint, which there's always going to be a discussion about that. But my point is, like, I'm not a user researcher, but my assumption is that when they do user research, they see that people miss these things, and that's why they put paint and other things to.
Well, also, I would say it's because we have such good graphics now, because if you look at the original on GameCube, the backgrounds were very much, you could tell they were backgrounds, and then the stuff you could interact with was like super bright.
I was about to point out is difference of contrast, right? Because the environment is naturally dark, and they purposely highlight like the breakable boxes and barrels in a lighter color because they were just brighter from the environment, so you could pick them out. You'd still miss stuff because not everything's gonna be noticeable, but in here I think the yellow paint is not as intrusive as some other games do. Like, it's not like bright, banana sun yellow.
It's really bright in Resident Evil 8.
Yeah. And 8 it's a lot different. Yeah, but I think in the remake, like, it's noticeable, but it's not immersion breaking in me. And also, like, there's so much in this game that could be breaking immersion anyway. Like, I'm not going to nitpick about breakable boxes. We mentioned that include the knife parrying. There's now a stealth crouching stance, which is totally different to Resident Evil. Like, now Leon has the ability to creep up on enemies, which I think is great, because now you can stab them, which I think is why they have weapon durability in here for the knife, because you can make this seem a cakewalk if you had an infinite knife. You just went up and knifed everybody, right? So it also doesn't work on every enemy, but for the typical human enemies, it works pretty well.
I also like that you can find regular, in the village at least, you can find a lot of like regular kitchen knives.
Yeah.
And then you just use those instead of your own knife.
I think that's a great concession. It's like you could find more knives throughout the area. Yeah. This also added a new Minotaur kind of enemy. He's got this big old hammer. He reminds me of one of the wolves with like the hammer in Resident Evil 8.
I forgot that he wasn't in the original.
I forgot that too until I realized, like, I swear he was in there.
He fits in pretty well.
Yeah. And also now they have these little side quests, which are pretty cool. They just get you more rewards. It's usually stuff like find the medallions in the area or kill X amount of enemies. So I think that's really great because you can turn them into merchant and get stuff. I don't remember. Did the original have the same inlaying of stones? No, I think that's new too. So that's one thing I had more fun with than I thought with this.
Well, I will say it had the inlay. I think you could combine stones to things.
Yeah.
It didn't have the depth that this one had, where you...
Okay, that's what I thought.
Where you can choose the colors and then get multiplier bonuses.
Yeah, because the idea here is like you'll find like a crown or something, or like a chalice, and then you can inlay these stones of different shapes and colors. And there's also a guide within the game that says, like, if you match 3 of a kind, or 3 of the same color, or 3 of the same shape, etc., you'll get a bonus because you'll sell these to the merchant, and you'll get way more than if you're selling the crown individually or the gems individually, which I like a lot, because that also makes it to where, if you are looking for everything in the game as far as like little details or trying to explore what you'll find these gems, and also could help you in an inorganic way where you can boost up your gear if you're having trouble with the game, because you're kind of exploring anyway naturally, and you're getting like your gear upgrade in such a way that it makes the game a little bit easier.
When I replayed it a couple nights ago, I forgot that sometimes the gems are just dropped by enemies.
Yeah, some of the lower end ones, yeah, which is great too, because then that gives you incentive to kill more enemies and also sell them to upgrade your gear or buy supplies, which is a big thing in this game. Yeah, so overall, I would say the remake is worth playing now. We could talk about the VR one because that's actually a really cool addition to this too. So Resident Evil 4 got a VR version. I think it was first on the Meta Quest 2 or something like that, which I thought was great, but I don't like Meta, so I won't buy the Meta Quest. PSVR 2 eventually came out, and then Capcom has been kind of going back and adding VR to some of their games. So they added it to, they originally added it to Resident Evil 7, and it sucks for that because that only has PSVR 1 compatibility. They didn't update the 2, which sucks.
Weird.
Because I'd like to play that. But they eventually added VR to 4. And it's one of the most awesome VR experiences I've ever done. And I know to see you love this VR experience because this is when you played the most by far.
Oh, for sure. Like anytime you're doing something else, I'm like, I'll just hook up the VR.
Yeah, it's great. I love PSVR 2 because it's just one cable.
Yeah.
Right? It's so much easier to hook up than like the freaking box and all the crap of the VR 1.
Yeah, this one, I can't imagine what VR is like for Resident Evil 7 because that game is scary in first person.
It was scary because I did play it.
And you're like...
Yeah, it's hard.
You're very at the will of the game. There's like cutscenes where you're getting attacked and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in 4, you're badass Leon.
Yeah.
And you feel like it. Like you can pull the gun from your hip. You can reload the way that anybody would reload.
Yeah, the gestures in here are so good because like you have... parts of your body you can map them to certain weapons. So like if you reach to your back, you pull out a shotgun.
Yeah.
Almost like Ash from Evil Dead.
Yeah.
You could reach out to your like your right leg to pull out a sidearm. You reload the weapons like you said. Like the gestures alone are what makes this worth playing just to try out. But you can play the whole game in VR. You've played through a few chapters alone, like because like you said, sometimes I'll be recording wherever else here. And you're just like chipping away at it.
Yeah, slowly but surely. I'm still in the village area. I haven't even fought I don't think I've fought the giant fish yet. I feel like I'm further than I am.
Oh, that'd be a cool boss. I'd imagine you harpoon them.
Yeah.
Right? We have to get there and try that out.
That must be a workout on the arm, just like chucking the harpoon.
Like a javelin?
Yeah. But then I was replaying the other night for this. I was replaying it on my playthrough, not VR. And I was like, oh my God, some of the later areas are going to be a nightmare in VR.
Yeah. It works really well because you can set to where, you do move Leon with the control sticks, which is great. Or no.
Yeah.
With the control sticks on the controllers. That's right. Yeah. But everything else, as far as combat, it's all handled through gestures and shooting and aiming. It works very well. It's one of the best VR games I've played, and I enjoy this a lot. Like the other VR games I usually like are like the like Beat Saber and like the sort of like super hot. Like there's more.
Yeah, where you're fairly stationary.
Yeah.
Like I remember on your VR 1, the Ace Combat was awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
But you're like sitting in a cockpit and flying it, whereas like this one definitely requires you to move around like a regular video game.
Yeah.
And it also trips me out because like the sticks will move you forward and back and everything, but if I'm trying to look at something, I will also try to turn myself, and I'm like, wait, I can just turn my head.
Yeah. And also, that's one of the things I had to grapple with too. Is like in a VR environment, like especially in Resident Evil 4, like you look all over you, and like it's the environment. Like, you're inside the game, which is really what's so impressive about it. It's like they, this game is third person with a camera behind the character. In this instance, they're giving you full control to look around you, and it's really cool because now you have a literal first-person perspective of some of the environments, which you can see some of the more like gory and horror details in the environments. It's really, really great. So I really love the VR in this game. I put it up there with like Half-Life Alyx. Like I think that's probably the better VR game because that was made for VR, obviously.
That makes sense.
But this is as far as being from a translation from a typical third-person game to VR, Resident Evil 4 VR is just such a freaking fun time. And it's one of those games that it still looks really good in VR. The controls work really well. Like I don't feel like there's any instance of lag or anything like that. It's just such a seamless transition from regular controller playing to VR.
The only issue I run into sometimes is how I'm sitting on the couch because you have to reach down around your waist for the guns or sometimes a grenade or something.
And I think the ammo too.
Yeah, and like it doesn't always connect or it doesn't always like trigger down there. You're like patting around on yourself while you're trying to run around.
Yep.
Which I guess is sort of authentic if you were panicking.
I might be panicking in that moment. I guess that's reasonable to assume. Yeah.
So like sometimes I'll be like reaching for something and I'm like, oh shoot, I need another clip, but this guy's right on me. So I just really quick grab the knife and start like poking at him.
Yeah,
Get
that's
away.
really cool. Yeah, because you just reach up to like your upper chest and pull the knife out because that's where it is on Leon, and you're just like stabbing people, and you could you're free stabbing. It's almost like a prison ship or something.
It's actually more effective than in the regular game because you can stab as quick as your hand can go.
Yeah, exactly. And you also have a little bit more control of where to aim, obviously too, right? So like you can aim at their legs if you want to start slashing there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Resident Evil 4 VR experience, if you are able to experience it, whether it's on the Quest or the VR2, definitely check it out. And it was great because it was a free add-on. It was an update they added to the PS5 version.
Nice.
Or yeah, it was PS5 version. I was like, this is great. Like I probably would have paid for this, like it's probably worth $20 for the amount of effort they put into it. But the fact that it's a free add-on and it's just like an extra mode you could play like, in your playthrough, it's not like a separate game either.
Yeah.
It's really impressive. It's really worthwhile. So I'd say like if you can, definitely check it out. At least look up some YouTube videos because it's definitely one of the most awesome experiences. I think it fits so well with the arcadey action nature of the game itself too.
Yeah, could you imagine if they ever redo like 5 or 6? 5 would be awesome if they have a remake and then they make it VR and then you have 2
co-op VR.
Co-op
that
VR.
Would be awesome, actually. Yeah,
you're like reaching out your hand to your buddy to give him ammo and stuff.
You gotta drag him backwards or something.
Yeah.
Violent. Yeah. Oh man, yeah. All right, Ducey. I guess we're ready to summarize Resident Evil 4 and sort of its impact and legacy on things. How do you feel about the game overall and in general relative to you and just, I don't know, I guess where you put it as far as like your best games of all time?
It's weird. Oh man.
Not numerically, but I'd say I'd say it's fair to say like for us, this is among the best games ever made.
Well, like we had our episode on the Resident Evil rankings and I believe I put the original and the remake tied at like 3rd.
Yeah.
And I think I'd still stand by that, even though I go back to it a lot more than some of the other games. It's just really fun. They did such a good job of like reinventing the series. Even if it turned into 5 and 6 for a little while, like at least it's now gotten us 8. 8 was like the first person version of 4.
Yeah.
And then 9 looks awesome. Like the Leon in that is the Leon we first experienced in 4. So thank you for making 4. Like as far as like overall games, I don't know where I would put it yet. It's weird how I sometimes forget about it for a while. And then when I play it again, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Why am I forgetting about this?
Yeah. I'm in the same instance where, I love the original. I'll always love that game because of how great it was and what it did, especially for just like I say, it defined its own genre. It influenced so many games after the fact, for better or worse, QTEs or not, but with like the over the shoulder shooting, it really sort of pioneered modern action games.
Yeah.
And when I did revisit this a little bit over the last couple of days because obviously we're recording on this, and I played through the first 2 chapters now, and every time I play through this game, I'm like, holy shit, like I just love this game so much. Like it's just so fun to play through. It feels so good. Like it's just such a great game overall. And to me, really is one of the best games ever made. And I think it's one of the most influential. And I think on my list too, I think I put like 2 or 3 as well, because I think really it's just nostalgia wins there. I think it was like Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil Remake, and 4. I can't recall. But really, like, all 3 of those could be number 1 to me. Because they all sort of defined the series, or sort of redefined the series in different ways. Like Resident Evil 2 was more action-oriented. Resident Evil 1 is, defined survival horror. Resident Evil 4 redefined action horror in a lot of instances, and a lot of modern sensibilities and design. So to me, this game is just noble for many reasons. Those Metacritic scores for both versions, like you can't ask for much better than that. Like especially like a 96 on the GameCube. That's irrespective of the fact that it's a GameCube, 96 out of 100 for any game is just mind blowing. A lot of games come close to 90, let alone come to like that Zelda Ocarina of Time, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 or 3. I forgot which one got near like 99 or something, or like a Mario 64. Like that's the echelon that Resident Evil 4 kind of sits in when you look at sort of those critic scores, right? Just alone, without even looking at like what the fans think of it. It's just that level of a game where it was released on a console that really needed a game like this, and maybe didn't boost console sales for the GameCube, but it was a significant game for what it was, despite that. Like even though it wasn't successful on the GameCube, I guess.
It's funny. I remember reading in that book that we both got, Itchy Tasty.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about how like it seemed like such a bonehead move for Capcom to go exclusive on GameCube, on Nintendo. And it's like they were complaining that like, oh, the GameCube sales aren't strong, so obviously the Resident Evil 4 sales aren't going to be strong. But it's like, that's the point.
Yeah, that you need something to boost it. Like you need a hook. And I think this is what it was, because GameCube, like Nintendo's Nintendo, they always have their bread and butter games like the Zeldas, the Marios, etc. But like you mentioned way early in this episode, it's like this is a point where third party is a big deal on all their consoles. Like Xbox, it's Microsoft. They published a few games like Halo and some of their own games, but they needed support from third party because they're a brand new original console.
And I feel like Capcom didn't do too much for the N64, if I'm remembering.
They did very little. They had the port of Resident Evil 2,
yeah,
and I think they had one other game,
Mega
Man Legends, right?
Mega Man Legends, yeah.
And I think that was it, because
Jesus.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I remember in our Street Fighter episode, I was like, why the hell aren't there any Street Fighter games on N64? Like, I want Capcom on here.
Yeah.
And they did almost nothing. So I think it's great because Capcom really kind of made their bed with Nintendo back then, right? And to an extent, Sega. But, it's like you usually associate Mega Man and Capcom and Nintendo all together. So it's great that they finally came back with the GameCube. So I could see why they're like, hey, like, we did well with Super Nintendo. You have great new hardware with the GameCube. Why don't we do something with it? Like, make some money with this. And that's why we got Remake, Zero, and all these other games that came out of it.
And like, to show how good it did on the GameCube, like, not sales wise, but I mean like graphics and everything. When the remake was announced, I was sitting here going, I don't recall that it needs a remake, because in my mind it looks so good still from the GameCube version, and it played so well.
Yeah, it still looks pretty damn good. Like I say, it's a little bit muddier and a brown, but
yeah,
it still looks great.
It wasn't until I got the modern controls, sorry Bob, that I realized, oh, this is why we needed the remake. It is so much better. Plus, a lot of the story bits are a little more concise and everything.
Yeah, they're more streamlined and refined, which is what you'd expect from a remake. So again, like this remake doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. It just needs to sort of smooth the wheel out a little bit.
We didn't even talk about Luis as a character.
Oh yeah, he's a side character in this whole thing.
Yeah. He's a great comedic relief at first, but in the remake, they really flesh out his character where like he accidentally helped create a lot of the virus and the way the parasites are being put into people, and now he wants to atone for that, and he's helping Leon and Ashley get that stuff out of them. It just made you like want him in the game more, and unfortunately,
well, yeah, you're more sympathetic towards him. Yeah,
in the first one, he was just sort of like there, and he was making rude comments to Ashley and stuff, and you're like, okay, one way or another, he's here in the game.
He really was like a side character. He was a supporting character who was just there to kind of fulfill his role in the story, but not necessarily have his own sort of motivations or his own. He's not as fleshed out in the original.
In fact, I want DLC where we play as Luis.
That'd be pretty great. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. For it's like, like even if you start with the point where it's like he realizes that where he's created is going to be being used to take over the world. Yeah, I'd be curious to see that sort of a line of thought for his story to how he gets to there, right? And now eventually meeting up with Leon and everything like that.
Yeah, you could start where he's just going to his 9 to 5 in a mundane way, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, there's some atrocities
just
happening.
Making some parasites. Oh, geez. Being used for nefarious means. Yeah. Man, so yeah, we had a pretty beefy episode here, Deuce. I don't know how long we went here.
It's fitting for this game.
I would say so. Yeah, this game. I mean, this game is just so damn good, and there was a lot to cover in here. So I think I don't know. I feel like we did pretty good justice for how big of a game this was, and also hopefully this is a little bit of a preamble for anyone listening to get into Resident Evil 9 if you have it. Because
I was about to say we gotta stop talking and let these people go out and play Resident Evil 9.
Including myself. I hope GameStop delivers it on the day of or something, because I really need to get that in my system here. But yeah, if you want to reach out to us to talk about Resident Evil or anything else, let us know at legiongamingpod@gmail.com. And like I mentioned before, you can find us on Instagram at Legion Gaming Podcast, where we post all kinds of goodies, collectibles, all kinds of random stuff. I'll probably post more Resident Evil stuff by the time this launches. But we really hope you enjoy Resident Evil 9 and just, anything Resident Evil. And if not, if you haven't revisited Resident Evil 4 in a while, just go do it. It just feels good every single time. It's just, I always like to say that some of these games are like comfort food, and I'd say like Resident Evil 4 is up there in my comfort food sort of itinerary.
Yeah, I'll have to put it back into my comfort food rotation.
Put it back on your menu, dude.
With Fallout 4, Resident Evil 8, all of those.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Ducey. Well, before we go back into Raccoon City, any final words for our friends here?
You have died.